And we're back. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in tonight for Vegan Gains and JimBob. Vegan Gains, why don't you take just a quick second, shout your channel out to everybody kind of where they can find you.
Yeah, so everybody can find me on YouTube. I don't have any other social media sources right now. I was banned from Twitter. There is an Instagram account of me, but it's fake. It's not actually me, so you can just find me on YouTube.
Gotcha. And we will get that link down. How did you get banned on Twitter anyway?
Alleged threat.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And then JimBob, go ahead.
Made by JimBob, political, cultural cartoonist and commentator or whatever. Made by JimBob is my YouTube, and also Made by JimBob is my Instagram, and madebyjimbob.com is my website.
I appreciate that. Before we get started with the debate, we just want to make sure that we have that proposition down so that both sides understand what it is. Can you guys both kind of define what the proposition is?
Yeah, so I believe we agreed upon should human rights be extended to animals.
Okay. And JimBob, is that good with you?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Whichever one of you wants to open, there's no real challenger tonight. JimBob, if you want to start, you can.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, if the topic is should we extend human rights to animals, we're going to have to go through and determine what a right is, what constitutes a right, where do rights come from, etc. But also, what is it peculiar about humans such that we assume the concept of rights? What is it? Is there something about humans specifically that make us sort of special in this case? Now, there's a couple of problems we'll probably see because the rights will then point to some other things. And most of the time in vegan debates, they point to sentience. Now, depending on how Vegan Gains define sentience, it will determine the direction of this debate. But the problem with sentience in general and the way it's defined is the problem of distinguishing between reactivity to stimuli and conscious thoughtful experiences. If my opponent appeals to sentience, he's going to have to distinguish between a neurological or biological reactivity to the external world and conscious, thoughtful, meaningful experiences. And the two, if there is a point at which one becomes the other, we have to figure out where that threshold is and why we determine that to be the threshold. In other words, a blade of grass, when it's mowed, has a reaction and it lets off some sort of smell, or a plant lets off some sort of toxin when it's reacting to something. So this must be fundamentally different than how sentience, as far as having a conscious, thoughtful experience about the world and having a value judgment about it, must be two different things. Problem two, why we ought to value sentience. So even if sentience is somehow established, what I think it's going to be pretty blurry. Where in the gradient of this distinction called sentience do we start assigning the value? Ought we introduce sentience where it's missing? Ought we not remove sentience where it actually is? The problem with sentience, as far as the precondition for experience, pleasure or pain, it doesn't tell us whether or not keeping it or removing it is good. It only tells us what you might be able to do with it once you have it. So that becomes a little bit of a problem, I believe, with my opponent. Problem three would be the equalization problem when he says trait equalization. If we equalize man and beast, this doesn't tell us whether we should mimic the beast or the man. And to make the claim, so once we equalize man and beast, the claim that comes after that, what we ought to do, how we ought to behave once these are equalized, we could just as well say, well, men should treat other men like beasts because we're now equal, right? So there's no distinction between beast and man. If you were to make a value claim on how you ought to behave toward animals once we're equal in traits and sentience, you are then actually going back on the equalization momentarily to then make the claim, because you would be a human making a human value judgment about how we ought to pursue this kind of thing. If we ought to treat animals, okay, yeah. So, and the other one is probably the NTT, which we'll probably get into. How much time do I have?
You still have over 4 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. So Yeah, the name, the trait, the infamous dialogue tree that a lot of vegans take. It basically calls the meat eater to ask or name a particular or set of traits that give humans moral consideration and not the animal. The person, um, in this case me, is led to either a contradiction or to bite a bullet by committing a seemingly absurd fallacy, or no, conclusion. I'm sorry, not fallacy. But the reason I say seemingly is because it's not logically absurd, whatever that bit bullet is. It's just silly consequence of the new invented reality. Keep in mind, every time I've run through this dialogue tree, it's not an internal critique of my current view and positions here in this place, Earth, this reality. It's an invented reality out there that may exist somehow in your imagination. Most of the time, this is producing the seemingly absurd conclusion. Most of the time is as a result of accepting an absurd hypothetical of other worlds introduced. Many times, the world that's introduced is actually contrary to the in this case my position. So I'd have to, and many times I have to abandon my worldview to then entertain this new world. So when you play that game, but even so, right? Even if if the conclusion when you bite the bullet is seemingly absurd, it's not necessarily unethical. The interesting thing about name the trait is that once you get to that seemingly absurd conclusion, it's actually on the vegan to then tell us why it's absurd. Now, if it just sounds silly to most people, then that's not really an argument. That's just incredulity, right? It might be convincing, but that's not to say it might not be convincing. It's just that it's not logically absurd. And so the vegan often has to go to other world hypotheticals, where in this debate, I will try my best to keep it in real world hypotheticals to render the vegan's position absurd.
Thank you so much for that opening. Vegan Gains, the clock is reset. You have 7 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have thousands of years of human history where I think over time we've developed not only social contracts between each other, implicit moral agreements, but we ended up codifying into law that is protected by people, their governments, and institutions, rights for ourselves, rights for each other. And I think those rights, for the most part, have been beneficial to us. They've protected us, and our communities and humanity as a whole. And I think it's only logical to extend those rights to beings that can also think and feel and benefit from those rights just like we can. If aliens were to come to Earth who could think and feel and looked similar to us, I think we would probably all agree they should have similar rights and protections under law that we would, and I think other beings that currently exist on our planet should also have those rights, like the cows, chickens, and pigs that we currently eat today. I have yet to see a meaningful moral distinction between ourselves and the animals that we eat that would justify eating those animals, but not justify eating our fellow human beings. And when people do attempt to make a meaningful moral distinction, and they point to something like the degree to which animals are sentient, to the degree to which they are intelligent, so forth, traits such as those, if we find human beings with comparable levels of sentience or intelligence or lacking in some sort of aptitude, most people are not comfortable with killing and eating those human beings. So people who are mentally disabled, for instance. So, yes, I'm going to request that my debate opponent point out these moral meaningful distinctions, and we'll test to see whether or not he's logically consistent with his moral views, whether or not he'd be okay with taking away human rights, and holocausting millions, perhaps even billions, of his fellow human beings just so that he has a logically consistent basis for going to McDonald's and eating a burger.
All All right, thank you for that opening. I understand rhetoric's important in a debate, but if we could stay away from that particular word, YouTube TOS gets pretty upset with us when we mention the H word. I've actually gotten
Say
channel problems
Just
from
by
it
mentioning it?
say
just by
burnt
saying the word. Yeah,
say
That's
burnt
bizarre.
offering.
yeah, that's fine. Whatever else you want to call it. I don't know why they just do. Um, it's ridiculous. But anyway, gentlemen, the floor is open. Go ahead.
I'd like to start by when you say rights, right? So if I were to ask you, let's say there was a wolf walking through the woods, and then it saw like a stream and a big old fish. Would you say the wolf is violating the fish's rights by eating it?
Yes.
Okay. If a bear was chasing you, would you justify defending yourself and killing the bear because it's about to
Yes.
eat you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Would you kill the wolf and stop the wolf from eating the fish?
So, I understand the question you're trying to ask. Fish are typically carnivorous, and aquatic ecosystems can be kind of complex. So,
But
if the wolf,
would you defend the
well,
fish's rights?
in principle, yes, but let me explain. I do believe carnivorous animals should be stopped from violating others' rights. Now, when it comes to fish, just so people understand my position better, um, fish can be like most fish are carnivorous. So, a carnivorous fish that's higher up on the food chain may consume other carnivorous fish that are lower on the food chain. So, by killing the carnivorous fish that's at the top of the food chain, you may actually end up with a greater degree of rights violations. But in principle, yeah, the idea that another animal killing another animal, yeah, I'd stop the other animal from killing another animal.
So you'd kill the wolf from eating the fish in
Or a
defense of the
deer,
fish's
right? Or a
rights.
deer to make
Okay.
things more simple. Yeah.
And
VG, can you turn your mic up just a bit? I'm sorry,
You want my
you're a little bit
mic
low.
up?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if you were to not kill the wolf, but would you do like a citizen's arrest? Would you detain the wolf? And what would be the process of a rights violation for an animal like a wolf?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, you cut out
If
for me.
oh, sorry, if you intervened with the wolf and the fish, but you didn't kill the wolf, and you somehow got it trapped in a net, what would be the process of going through the justice system of rights violations between animals?
Well, since animals do not have the level of intelligence that we do, it would basically be a similar process to how we might deal with a human being that's severely mentally disabled if they killed somebody. We could either institutionalize them, so like keep a wolf in captivity, feed it like vegan dog food. That would be ideal. If there isn't a system where we could keep a wolf in captivity and it would just, the only other option is to let it loose and kill other animals, then yeah, I'd kill it.
Okay, and then so if let's hypothetically say everybody decides to go vegan, would the next logical step would be to fully intervene with animal to animal aggression?
If there was an interest in doing so, we could. Like again, I'm in favor of killing carnivorous animals in cases where it would cause a rights violation. And to be clear, I don't think we have any obligation to prevent rights, or sorry, intervene in rights violations. The only obligation we have is to not violate another creature's rights.
And then when do you determine that creature's rights? I mean, a fish is pretty low on the, I would say
Yeah,
you would agree on the sentient scale. Where does the sentient, well, can you
somewhat
define
low, yeah.
sentience is for you?
Yeah, so sentience is the ability to have a conscious experience or a
And how,
subjective experience.
okay, and then how do you distinguish that from reactivity to stimuli?
Well, again, it's a conscious experience. It's not simply intelligence. Another way to put it would be a subjective experience.
Well,
That might.
I'm okay. I'm saying the question is, how do you distinguish between an experience and a reactivity to external stimuli?
How do you determine, like, logically deduce?
Well, how do you? I mean, making the claim that there's a distinction between,
Right.
let's say, a
Well,
snail. You touch
again,
a
the
snail.
distinction, yeah, like I know, like yeah, you can cut a blade of grass, it'll release chemicals
Mhm,
versus like I don't know, stabbing a fish.
mhm.
The way you logically deduce is based on whether you can determine whether the creature is having a subjective experience. So a blade of grass can release chemicals and intelligently react to stimuli. That doesn't mean it's having a subjective experience where it's consciously aware of itself, its surroundings, and what's happening to it. Kind of like
Uh,
how a computer, like you can send an email, the computer will intelligently react to that email, give you a notification. That doesn't mean that the computer is conscious.
right, but the computer has a mind, and so if you're saying that
What do you mean
intelli
by mind?
well, you're assuming a mind, right? Because the
No, I'm
distinction
not.
actually, yeah, because you're not, you still haven't
I'm
made a
not assuming a mind in all cases. What do you mean?
well, you're assuming there is a distinction between a mechanism just playing out its chemical activity and an experience, which is the thing watching that reaction, that experience, that thing that's occurring. So in other words, if I touch something and it reacts and it responds and it like curls up, the difference, I haven't heard the difference or the distinction between the snail's body or chemicals reacting to the external world and then the experience, which is a qualitative assessment of what just occurred. That's a it's almost like a post hoc thought process about the experience. It makes a judgment about the experience. It makes a future, perhaps a
Okay.
future notion of the experience. And so I
Let
don't think you get out of the
I'll
mechanism
Okay, I'll try
that
to
you're.
explain this in a way that maybe you can more easily understand. If you were to cut your own finger off, you would feel the experience of your finger being severed. You'd feel the pain. Nerve endings would be, excited and send a signal up to your brain. And then through that whole process in your brain where it sends signals to the pain receptors and shit, you interpret these things as subjective experiences like pain, shock,
What about people who are
horror,
not born with pain?
fear. Sorry?
What about people who aren't born with the ability to feel
Well,
pain?
then there will be other experiences related to that. Even people who are born without pain, which is a rare genetic disorder, they still have sense of touch. So they will feel their finger being severed. It's just not going to result in a pain response, and they'll also be able to see or
So you're
maybe
saying
hear. So like, well, let me finish. But if you were to take said severed finger and poke it, yeah, there's cells in there. You might actually, in some cases, be able to get the finger to move around and twitch if you prod it with electricity. You can do that with dead frogs. That doesn't mean the finger itself is experiencing anything just because it reacts to whatever
yeah,
stimuli you give
yeah,
it.
that's exactly what I'm asking, is that how do you determine the difference between reactivity and thoughtful conscious
Okay,
experience?
well, that's what I asked you first, whether or not you were asking me to like how we deduce whether something's intelligent merely or sentient. The way, like the easiest way to do that would probably be to ask it if it's sentient. A human being can certainly answer that question. Other animals, because they lack language or an ability to communicate, they probably won't be able to tell you, but there will be indications of sentience.
So if you're
So if they have a brain, nervous system, similar structures to ours, if they react to noxious stimuli, that's typically a way researchers determine whether or not something is sentient. So if they have these structures and they can react to noxious stimuli, and the reaction to that noxious stimuli is similar or identical to the way that we react to noxious stimuli, that pretty much deduces that they are sentient. I mean, we could argue we can't possibly know another mind, but then you could say that same thing about other human beings. I mean, some human beings could just be machines reacting to stimuli, and to some degree we are. Like, we are just machines reacting to stimuli. It's just that we're
do you
assuming that
believe
other
that?
people have. Well, we're making an assumption that there are other minds, and I think
Uh,
that's a reasonable assumption to make.
Okay, but would you say a mind would then be outside or can't be tied down to just strict physical activity?
I have not seen any compelling evidence that there are like souls or spirits or something
No,
that
I
are
didn't say
also,
that. I'm just
yeah.
saying if that's the case, let's say if vegan gains, if you really thought you were just kind of like a wet machine, right? That was in constantly reacting to external stimuli and as complex as it might be, that even your thoughts and your reasoning and any sort of propositions you make about the external world or your experience would also just necessarily be reactivity. Like it would just
Yeah,
be the unfolding of a process that's pretty much bound to like the laws of
well,
physics.
I'm agnostic as to whether or not we have free will or if we're living in a deterministic universe. I think there's a better argument for determinism than free will, but I'm agnostic.
Well, if determinism was true, the consequence would be that you wouldn't know it to be the case because any knowledge about it would be impossible because it would be determined. Everything you thought and said would be already a part of a process unfolded. But we're getting I
Well,
don't want to get off track of
yeah,
veganism.
yeah, sure.
Let's get back to sentient. You would you say that like these new robots, you know, the silly ones that like on Jimmy Fallon that talk and
No.
would you say that it might well just say like robots that they try to model after human beings? If those became in your parameters, met your parameters for sentient, would you allot rights to the robots?
Yeah, so machines don't have a brain, nervous system, nociceptors. So the way we would determine sentience in a machine might actually be quite a bit different than the way we determine sentience in a biological organism because they don't have similar structures. And you can program a machine to act as though it's sentient. You could put sensors on its body, and if you poke it, it could react in a painful
But
manner. So
okay,
it
but
really
if
entirely depends. I think you'd have to determine that on a hardware and code level.
right, but if human beings are, in your view, just a machine, then it would be possible completely to model a robot and have them fully experience not just pain, but the interpretation of pain, the preference to not feel pain, the preference for pleasure. Because in your view, it would just be a matter of coding consequences into the system, right? If this, then
Possibly.
that, right?
I mean, I'm not an AI specialist, but I mean in theory it makes logical sense. We could create, say, a simulation that perfectly models like human consciousness, or I don't know if you've ever played Fallout 4, where they literally make human beings with a 3D printer. Like, yeah, it's possible.
We got to thread the needle back to veganism here.
Okay,
Yeah, but like let's just talk about the salient point. Like, what's the moral distinction between humans and animals where you think it's okay to create a burnt offering of billions of animals so that you can have a burger versus not giving human beings the same treatment? And if we were to find that meaningful trait or set of traits
mm.
that a human is lacking, that animals also lack, why would you be okay with killing human beings of that nature?
uh,
Um,
No, I don't. I don't locate a single or even a set of particulars. Certainly not properties of nature to create sort of like a bundle that equals the human and how I value the human. But the problem is with that position that you just offered is that someone could just be amoral, and it would still be on you, the vegan, to tell me. What is it about you as a human being, vegan gains, that gives you a moral priority in your claims to not eat meat? So if you equalized animals and humans, we would still be left asking, well, should humans just act more like animals or should
well, I
animals
already
act
gave
like
my
humans?
preference.
Right. If it's preference, then it's arbitrary, right?
Well, yeah, to some degree, anybody's preferences are going to be arbitrary. You have a preference towards Christianity, like, okay.
Right. But then if it's just preference, you wouldn't really need a moral
Well, I believe in
justification.
logical consistency. So, well,
So
yeah, sure, you don't
do you
necessarily
prefer
need.
logical consistency?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, Okay, I know you're a presuppositionalist, right? We can go down that rabbit hole.
No, because I'm not making a theistic argument.
Well, you're making the same argument that I am. It's just that you're presupposing a God or a Christianity or whatever set of beliefs you have,
No, I
whereas
told you.
I'm
No, I could be
presupposing my own preferences.
no, I could be amoral. I said I could say eating meat,
Right.
eating animals, neither here nor there, and you have to tell me as the vegan to say no. You shouldn't eat animals for this reason.
Well, yeah, if you believed that it is you don't care about killing and eating animals, you don't care about human beings.
How would it change if
Uh,
I just said I prefer to eat animals from your preference to not? Right? You already admitted it's arbitrary and preference based.
I think we're already assuming that you have the preference to eat animals because you aren't vegan. But the thing is, you believe in human rights, do you not?
No.
You don't believe in human rights. Is this in the hypothetical, or do you like actually not believe in human rights?
No, rights themselves are mostly a legal system. And so like
Right.
murder rights and so there's a system and structure that has consequences. And what rights really are is a uniform it doesn't do a good job, but it's the attempt at a standardized system of justice and its processes. And
Sure.
it's after the activity, right? So
No.
no, I don't really buy into rights. I think life is a gift. Not we don't have a right to life. We're given a gift of life, and so that's why I find a problem with even the
I
argument to extend human rights to animals. Not just because I deny the right itself, but it all falls apart with my example of the the wolf and the you have the right to kill the bear, right? In self
yeah.
defense,
Okay.
right?
Right.
But yeah, but then the wolf, you have to process the wolf. You don't go to jail for killing the bear in self-defense, right? But the bear has to go to jail in your view for just eating a fish. Like that's where your
I'm.
conclusion lands you, right? Is that you
I,
have to
I'm. I.
detain the bear.
Well, I mean, bears do not have the level of intelligence that we have, where we can hold them responsible for their actions the way a human being can. And again, if we were to trait equalize a human being who is, say, mentally disabled to the point where they're comparable to a bear,
So you would starve a bear
we,
if you had the ability to stop it from eating fish.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
great.
again, I've given like fish is a weird example. I'd rather use deer just so it's more clear, but yeah, in principle, yes.
Okay, so would you then a mother who starves her child, you don't think they should go to jail then?
That's not what I said, and I don't know how that logically leads to that point.
Well, because you said you would starve the bear if you could from
Okay,
eating to survive.
well, look, here's my position. I don't think vampires, zombies, or ghouls should kill and eat people. Would you starve a zombie, a vampire, or a ghoul? Like, the point is, we're trying to prevent rights violations.
Yeah, but
So,
the bear is defending its life by eating.
yeah, sure, okay.
So you are actually killing a bear by intervening with its ability to feed itself. How is
Yeah,
that not starvation? How is that not
so,
starvation?
well, I didn't say it's not starvation.
And you should go to jail for then intervening with the bear's ability
No,
to feed itself.
no, okay, should police go to jail for stopping a serial killer?
No, because that's a law.
Okay.
That's not in nature.
Okay, well, let's say.
There's no rights in nature.
Okay, well, that's just question begging. My whole argument is
What's
that
a right?
there should be.
What's a right? You saying rights is question begging. What's a
Look,
right?
look, this is question begging. The whole argument is to extend rights to animals. So by saying that they don't have rights, that's literally begging the question. So I don't know what else to tell you if you're not getting this.
Okay.
So to back up, can you be clear? What do you think the part is that's being question begging?
Well, right. So the debate is whether or not rights should be extended to animals. My argument is that based on similar characteristics that animals and humans share, they should be extended to animals. He's saying that because animals don't have any rights, they should not have any rights.
No,
It's question begging.
I'm saying I don't see any rights. You
Right,
haven't justified
it's question
these rights.
begging.
You haven't justified what rights are. That's not question begging. You're claiming rights.
Sorry, well,
I'm asking what's a right and where do they come from?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, right, they have to be granted. And
Granted
my
for who?
argument is that they should be granted on the basis of trait similarity. And I think we should probably get through this by running Name the Trait. So what is the trait that is lacking in animals that if lacking in human beings would justify taking away human rights?
It's not a trait.
Okay, well, it would have to be.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would have to be.
It's a category.
You're making a separation between humans and animals, so there is a trait or set of trait.
Are humans animals?
Well, yeah, they are. We're talking about we're talking about human and non-human animals.
If animals and humans were exactly the same,
right? So you agree there's trait differences.
Yeah, there's a category difference. It's not even a trait difference. It's a whole category.
Okay, so what's the category difference?
Being a human is not being an animal or a bear. Or a fish.
Okay. So are you talking about species? Are you talking about some other kind of concept?
No, well, I mean, a human being is, in my view, made in the image of God. Where it's a whole other category.
Okay.
It's not, animals aren't.
Okay, so so that's the salient trait. Being made in the image of God.
Well, I don't think it's a trait, no.
Well, that is a trait.
No, it's a transcendental category. It's not a trait. Trait would be reduced to some particulars.
Well, a trait can be a more complex concept. Like, obviously, the concept of species is more complex than the concept of color.
Right, those are natural properties. Made in the image of God is not a natural property.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's a natural property or not. I'm just asking you, is that the salient trait? Is the reason you're okay with killing animals is because they're not made in the image of God?
Yes.
Okay. Then if there was a supposed human being that was not made in the image of God, you'd be okay with killing those human beings.
Impossible in my worldview.
Absolutely is possible.
How is it possible?
Well, God could not exist.
That's impossible.
Okay, well, you're saying it's logically impossible for there to not be a God.
No, I'm saying it's logically impossible for a human being to exist that's not made in the image of God. And
well, it is because God could not exist.
Could? No, I
yeah,
don't.
It's possible there is no God.
No, I don't think you can justify that claim.
Okay, are you fallible?
Me? Yeah, I'm fallible.
So you could be wrong.
No.
No, you're right about everything. You're right about everything.
No, you listen. It's your claim. You have to have full access to the.
My claim is that it's possible for you to be wrong as to whether or not a God exists.
No, forget me. You said it's possible for God not to exist. You haven't actually established that.
I don't need to. It is logically possible that a God could not exist.
No, it's not.
Well, and by the way, we don't even have to argue on that level. The claim you're making is that God made us in his image. It's possible that God made us, just not in his image. Like, so is it possible that God made us but not in his image?
I don't think so.
Okay, you don't think so. So now you're not making so certain of a claim.
Well, no, I'm saying that to even explore that, you'd have to take a metaphysical. It's not just like a straight prop logic. You'd have to explore what it even means to be human.
Okay, are you a fallible being? Could you be right or wrong?
I can be right or wrong, yeah, but not
right. Okay, so you could be wrong that God made us in his image, and you could be wrong that God even exists.
Nope.
Okay, how is it possible that you cannot be wrong about that?
Because the concept of right and wrong, logic, reasoning, language, regularity in nature, all of the stuff that you are appealing to, like metaphysics, concepts, these things could not exist without God in an intelligible way. Therefore, even asking the question, you're actually borrowing a whole category of things that you can't even justify yourself. According to your view, by the way. Hold on. Your view is that you're a wet machine. You can't even account for epistemology, let alone whether it's right or wrong to put a bear in jail.
Okay, like, again, we've gone through this. You're a presuppositionalist Christian. You're just presupposing the existence of God. It's not based on
presupposing rights.
Well, yeah. I
and logic.
presuppose
And logic.
presuppose other minds. Like there are things that we have to
What's a mind?
presuppose, but you're just
What's a mind?
choosing to
What's a
presuppose a
mind?
God.
Hold on, vegan. What's a mind in a strictly physical universe?
Well,
You still haven't distinguished between
I
reactivity
don't
and
have
mind.
to answer that question.
If you use
the
the term,
thing is,
if you use the term mind, yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I don't have to answer the question
What's a
of
mind?
what a mind is.
Sure you do.
What you have to answer is how the hell is it possible that you, as a fallible being, cannot possibly be wrong about whether or not a God created us in his image?
Because I already told you, the concept of right and wrong, logic, truth requires God.
No, I could say the concept of logic, truth, right and wrong requires penis. I
No.
could presuppose anything. You're just choosing to
Incorrect.
presuppose God.
No. Penis is a physical thing. It exists physically. It's
Okay,
not
magic penis.
that.
Interdimensional penis.
How does-
Like,
Okay,
you
hold
can
on.
presuppose anything.
No, you can't. Here, I'll ask you why. How does the your magic penis justify the laws of logic?
Laws of logic.
Yeah, how does it justify the existence of the laws of logic? Regularity in nature. How does your
How do you
magic
know
penis,
logic exists?
we assume it.
There you go.
It's ridiculous to.
There you go.
What? Yeah.
You literally just said we assume it.
Yeah, we do assume.
What does this have to do with God?
But how does that refute anything?
I've never
you
seen
assume
a
right.
presuppositionalist Christian
You
who's
assume-
actually answered that question wrong.
We all assume things. Okay,
Buddy, you
Buddy,
literally
you
just
assume a
proved my
mind.
point.
You assume a mind, and you didn't justify a mind in your strictly materialistic view.
You literally just proved my point.
You can't prove
you are
points without a
trying to
mind.
make the argument. You were trying
can't
to make
prove
the
points.
argument that all these things come from God, and then you just admitted you assume it. So
I
your
can't-
assumptions could be wrong.
No, dude, I can't assume anything without law. Vegan, I can't assume anything without a mind or the laws of logic, reasoning, concepts, language, math. Right, the concept of truth. So you saying you
assume all those things. You just admit it. You just admitted it.
In order to assume them, there's no way around it. It's completely circular. We can't assume the law. We can't question the laws of logic without assuming them, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And what's assuming? What's the thing doing it? Is it a machine?
I don't know, but we're assuming it. We
Who is
agree on that point.
What's the thing that's assuming animal rights or human rights in your view?
Us.
No, who is you? What is you? Is it a machine?
I don't know, and I don't have to answer that question.
Yes, you do, because
that's not a salient point.
I'll tell you why it is because if you're physicalist, are you a physicalist in this?
I don't know what that means.
Just all that exists is matter, physicalism. You're just a machine.
I don't know.
Okay. So the problem is when you start getting it back to veganism. Let's say you go back to sentience, right? You assume a mind that's distinct from reactivity, right? That's what you assume, right?
It's not necessarily distinct from reactivity. What I define as sentience is the ability to have a subjective experience. Doesn't mean it's distinct from reactivity.
Is it possible for a house to have a subjective experience, a smart house?
Like, again, it's logically possible if we developed a sentient AI that's controlling the house.
So if that was the case, would you give houses rights?
If they were sentient, then possibly. If they had a meaningful degree of sentience.
And then you wouldn't be able to take down the house and rebuild a new one because you'd be violating the house's rights.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, assuming it has a substantive degree of sentience.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, I mean, I guess we can just go because that conclusion, right? It's like you don't know what sentience is, where it starts.
Okay, buddy,
where
you're wandering off from the point that you just embarrassed yourself on. So again, you admitted that it's possible that a God did not create us in his own image.
No, I didn't.
You admitted that's an assumption you're making.
You didn't understand. I can't make an assumption without grounding the possibility of assumptions. Now, in my view, you can't even make assumptions.
Right, so you could be wrong about everything. You
No.
agree. If it's an
No.
assumption, you could be wrong.
I can't be wrong about the necessary preconditions for there even being the possibility of things being right or wrong. You understand? We're not even operating
You're
on the thing
assuming
of
that.
no.
Yes,
I'm
you
using
are.
logic. That's the only way it can go.
You're
right?
assuming that there is such a thing as logic. You admitted that.
To assume anything is to assume logic already. So that's like a redundant.
Okay.
Can you think
you're
without?
still
Can you
assuming.
think without it?
Well,
Assuming.
can you think without logic? I mean, possibly.
Okay, and now we're back to the mind, right? Because you need a mind to assume something, and you can't justify a mind, and no one can justify a mind without God. You can't even tell me what it is.
You're assuming God exists. You're assuming
What's
you
a
have a
mind?
mind. You're assuming logic. You literally admitted you're assuming all these things.
Okay,
So if it's an assumption, then you would have
isn't
to agree
Vegan Games.
that you
this
could
is
be wrong.
this is not an argument on God's existence. You're trying
Well,
to take
let
it
me
off
let
the
me
fact
ask
that
you
you just
this.
defended House's rights.
Well, let me ask you this: Are you God?
Mm-mm.
So is it possible for you to not know God's mind?
I'd never claimed to know God's mind.
Okay. So if you don't claim to know God's mind, then it is possible that God did not make you or any other person in his image.
No, that doesn't follow.
You don't know his mind.
I know his purpose for us.
Okay, you're lying. You're a
How do you-
clown, dude. Okay, look, if you're not going to admit this, I think the
Houses-
debate's over.
Houses have rights, but I'm the clown.
Look, you're a clown. You admitted you're making all of these things are assumptions. You admitted that you do not know God's mind, and again, that's just an admission that this is an assumption that God
No.
made you in his image. So
You're
you're
making
even
massive-
refusing
No.
to acknowledge that it's possible. I'm not even arguing whether or not God exists.
You're
I'm just
making a
arguing the
category
point
error.
that it's possible that God did not make you in his image. And you won't even admit that, even though along the entire way you said all of these things are assumptions and you do not know God's mind.
You're making a category error.
No.
Yes, you are.
Please explain.
Knowing God's mind is not the same of knowing God's plan or purpose for us.
Okay, that doesn't
I don't need
matter.
to know. I don't need to know your whole mind, Vegan Gains, to know that you would put a wolf in jail if it ate a fish.
Okay, great.
So therefore,
that literally has nothing to do with what I just said.
It does, because you're assuming I need to know fullness of God's mind, right? I have to know God's mind to come to the conclusion that God's necessary for thinking, for any sort of intelligibility.
Yeah, so again, you assume that God exists. You assume that that he created us in his image. You assume all of these other things like logic. So you would have to agree that it's possible that you're wrong on these things.
Okay, fine, I'll grant it. Just for the sake of moving on back to veganism.
Okay, great. Okay, so then it is possible that there are human beings that were not made in God's image.
Not on this, not in my view on this planet, no.
Okay, so gay people, transsexuals, they're made in God's image. Is God gay or a tranny?
No, gay is a activity.
Well, gay isn't an activity. It's also
Yes, it is.
a sexuality.
No, you can't have sex with the same sex. Sorry, that's irrational.
You can have sex with the same sex.
No, you can't. Where's the sexual organ how's that work? Can you have sex with a guitar?
Have you ever heard of docking?
Can you have sex with a guitar?
Like we can get.
Yes or no?
So probably not.
Okay.
I guess it depends on how you mean sex. Like, do you mean
I mean it the way that
interacting
everybody.
between sexual organs?
No, I mean.
Okay. Do you believe in the concept of oral sex?
No, that wouldn't be considered sex. No.
Okay, so if two people wanted to remain
How's that-
virgins up until marriage, you'd
How's that to do
say
with
anal
veganism?
sex and oral sex wouldn't break somebody's virginity.
Let's get back to veganism.
Well, no, sorry. So do you believe that people should remain virgins until marriage?
Sure.
Okay, so if a girl wanted to get fucked up her ass or suck a dude's dick, that wouldn't violate like a virginity oath?
Maybe not necessarily virginity, but it would still be as sinful. It would be
Okay, well, okay, sorry.
Sorry.
So you don't consider that sex?
No, it's not actually sex. No, it's mutual masturbation.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, continue.
Yeah. So I still haven't heard why. The reasoning of why anyone should be vegan.
Yeah.
All you've done so far is try to
right.
extend
So
a non-distinguished
we've established
thing called
the salient. Okay, we've established the salient trait, which is made in the image of God. You admitted that it's possible that you could not be made in the image of God. So if no one was made in the image of God, you'd be fine with holocausting everybody. What if it was just certain people like Jews?
Just watch.
Sorry,
watch
yeah,
horror.
the H word. Sorry.
Yeah.
So if Jews were not made in the image of God, you'd be fine with wiping them out and turning them into cheeseburgers?
The distinction. I mean, I still haven't heard why wiping out pigs is wrong. So why would it matter?
You
for
literally
humans?
made the salient distinction, the
Yeah, why would it
trait,
matter?
which is made in the image of God. So
Yeah, what would it matter? There'd be no morality. It would just be, fight for your life and eat whatever you want.
well, no, I said that suppose only Jews were not made in the image of God. So you'd be fine with turning them all into cheeseburgers.
No, because that would presuppose that God made someone in their image. So God would
Right,
exist.
it would be you and I
No,
don't know, other
No, because for that to exist, for that to be the case, then God would exist, and now you're inventing a new God that's not even my you're not doing an internal critique.
Okay,
of my
so
position.
again, we can go through this whole thing again. You can't know God's mind. You're making assumptions about all this. You could be wrong. So, assuming that God only made you and other people like you in his image, but Jews were not made in God's image, you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I probably wouldn't know how to distinguish that if that were the case, because humans are all.
Well,
in my
suppose
view,
you
they're
could.
all made.
Suppose God told you they're not made in his image.
I could suppose that carrots cry at night when they sleep because they have bad dreams. Who gives a shit about what?
Okay, well, it's funny you say this, it's a complete double standard. Well, how would I know if somebody is or isn't made in God's image? Okay, well then you fucking just proved my point that you can't know whether or not somebody is made in God's image.
No.
But you made a big deal about this.
No, because I hold that all people are made in God's image.
Right, but you can't know. So if there were supposedly somebody who wasn't made in God's image, you wouldn't know.
It wouldn't be.
So this works both ways. This works both ways.
No, dude, it wouldn't be possible in my worldview. You're just inventing possible other worlds that doesn't.
Right. Well, that's fine. That's fine. So you've already admitted that you could be wrong, that we're made in God's image. It could be the case that only some people are made in God's image. So again, I'm asking you.
That's like
if
asking.
Jews were not made in God's image, would you be okay with turning them into cheeseburgers?
I wouldn't know the distinction between one.
You would, because in the hypothetical you would know. So would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image?
I wouldn't recognize them as human.
Okay, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
No, I wouldn't recognize them as human.
Right, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know if they would be good cheeseburgers.
Okay, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know if they would be good cheeseburgers.
Well, I'm not asking you whether or not they'd be good cheeseburgers. I'm asking you whether or not you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know. Maybe something more useful and long-term, durable.
Okay, I don't know. Bacon, fucking anything. You'd be fine with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image.
I wouldn't. If they weren't made in God's image, I don't know what they would be.
Okay, so again, you're dodging the question.
No, I wouldn't know what they were.
I'm asking you whether or not you would have a moral issue with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image.
If they weren't made in God's image, maybe they would look like a carrot.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't matter.
No,
okay,
it does.
again,
here's the problem.
We already went through this. You admitted that it's possible that no one is made in God's image. So assuming you still hold this principle, you'd be fine with wiping out every fucking human on Earth.
What's a human then? So would you. What are you talking about? You have no you don't even have a reason why not to kill other human beings.
The salient point that you made, the trait that you named, was being made in God's image. It has nothing to do with being human. You just said being made in God's image. So a cow could be made in God's image.
No, not in my
Cows could be made in God's image.
Not in my view.
Well, Not
In your
well.
view.
Again, that's an assumption, isn't it?
No, it's
that
a
you're
whole,
assuming that.
no,
You
it's a
literally admitted
No, I
you're
don't.
assuming all of these things, which is why you agreed earlier. You conceded.
No, I don't assume those things. Like I said, I assume I said I assume the laws of logic.
Right, so you assume the laws of logic, you assume God exists, and you assume that God made us in his image, which is what you conceded earlier. So now you're backtracking?
The problem is you still can't tell me, even if that were the case, why it would be wrong to kill other humans or animals.
This is your moral view. You said the
My whole
meaningful
worldview.
difference. You said the meaningful difference between humans and non-human animals is being made in God's image. So if Jews were not made in God's image, you'd be fine with turning Jews into cheeseburgers.
I already told you, if that wasn't the case, that would require me to abandon my entire worldview. So it's not my worldview. You're asking me to go vegan. You're
Okay,
hold on. Let me finish. What you're doing is saying, JimBob, if you didn't believe your worldview and your worldview wasn't your worldview, would your worldview be consistent if it wasn't your worldview? That's all you're asking.
I'm not asking you to abandon your worldview. I'm testing your consistency on the principle that you said was meaningful, which is being made in God's image.
I already told you, if I abandoned made in the God's image, I wouldn't be able to distinguish.
I'm not asking you to abandon that. I'm asking you. I'm trying to test your logical consistency, and apparently logic is something you believe in, but I'm not convinced yet.
You're doing a trick. Here's the trick. You're saying you're basically doing an identity a violation. So you sneakily, by the way, using the J's, right, for an effect, right? You're basically saying, JimBob, everything you say in your worldview that means what it means to be human, right? Everything you believe. Let's just imagine there's these other humans, right, that aren't that, requiring me to abandon my view and making a judgment about the consequence of abandoning my view. Yeah, the consequence of abandoning my view would be inconsistency, but I'm not
asking you to abandon your view.
Yes, you are, because who are these creatures you're talking about?
Your view is that if you are made in God's image, you should be protected in some way, or you should have a right to life.
No.
Oh, okay. So you believe I should be able to go around and shoot other human beings? Do you think I should be able to kill your entire family?
You can actually.
Okay, should I be able to?
No, you can. It's not. You're capable. Of doing it.
We all know we can and we're capable. Should you be allowed to? Yeah, should you be allowed to? Do you think it's moral to do so?
No, it's not moral to do so.
Okay, so it's immoral. Okay, so it's immoral.
Yes, but you're allowed to.
Well, sure. Like we all know, I could piss on my own face. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Is it moral to go out and kill your family?
No.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. In your worldview, you just said you conceded to this. The distinction between humans and non-human animals that makes it moral to kill animals, immoral to kill human beings, is being made in the image of God. Okay, well, you admitted that you're assuming that all humans are made in the image of God. You could be wrong about that. It could be that Jews aren't made in the image of God. Maybe cows are the only ones made in the image of God.
Not in my worldview.
Do you think? Well, no.
It's not possible in my
worldview. Sorry. It is your belief that Jews are made in the image of God along with you. That's not your worldview necessarily.
Yes,
that's your belief, and you admitted that belief could be wrong. So supposing your belief was wrong and Jews were not made in the image of God, would you be okay with turning them into cheeseburgers?
No, you're just.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God?
It's a nonsensical.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God?
Nonsensical.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God? Okay, then debate's over. Debate's over.
Is that how it
I'm
worked?
done. I'm done. So you lost. You're a clown.
Oh, is that how?
You're dishonest. No, you're just dishonest, and it's a waste of my time. So wrap it up.
That's it.
I mean,
that's it. I'm done. You're a waste of my time.
Okay. So if I said no,
you're a waste of my time. I'm done. I don't care what you say. You're an idiot.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you're done, you're done. There's we're not ready to get to the calls of the supers just yet. So that's totally up to you. I can't hold you here. Obviously,
we can get to super chats and stuff like that, but yeah.
Well, I gotta run the flow out. We still got a half hour of this before I can even let callers in. So
let another vegan on. Get him out of here. Someone in the chat is a vegan. Bring him on.
It's up to you, VG.
I'm fine with kicking me off and inviting somebody else on. I'm done. We can talk. We can sit here and talk about something else if it's a big inconvenience to you. But we're done on the veganism topic.
Okay. Well,
the guy is clearly dishonest, and I'm just gonna keep repeating myself, and he's refusing to answer. So he knows he lost.
That's not true.
Well, the thing is
quitting is losing. Quitting is losing.
I'm not quitting. I've just proven that you're a dishonest person. You're incapable of engaging in a discussion.
How did I lie?
And it's pointless to continue.
How did I lie?
Well, everybody saw how you lied and how you're being dishonest and evasive.
Tell us.
So
tell me.
No, we're done. There's no point in telling you. There's no point. Why would I bother wasting my time when you're a dishonest person who cannot be reasoned with?
I am honest.
So I'm not going to bother.
I'm telling you.
Ask people from the audience what they think. Ask whoever else. I'm not engaging with you because you're just a dishonest person who's wasting my time.
I answered it honestly. I told you I wouldn't be able to distinguish what that would be. Right.
Sure.
In my worldview, I wouldn't be able to distinguish it.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, I mean, all right. If it's wrapped up there, it's wrapped up there. Off to the chat. So we still got about 25 minutes before we open up the call lines. VG, I do appreciate you coming in. Kind of is what it is. If that's where you want to end it, that's where you want to end it. I can't, force you guys to engage, obviously. So I appreciate your time today. Did you want to shout your channel out before you went, or?
Yeah, like everybody can find me on YouTube Vegan Gains. Again, if this is really inconvenient for you, and I know you're running a business and shit here, I can stay around and discuss some other topic or something, or answer questions in the chat.
Well,
but
maybe we can get
it's pointless.
Can we get if we can't stay on the vegan topic? There was an interesting part where we were getting into meta ethics. Can we follow up there?
Sure, if you want to have a discussion about some of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so a lot of this hinged on whether or not logic was assumed, and maybe we can kind of pick it up from that position. So, JimBob, you want to?
Well, let me do something a little less meta than that, but still a little bit meta. Is that let's go with sentience, Vegan Gains. Let's say we could remove sentience, because sentience in your view would be the ability to feel pain and other experiences, including pleasure. So ought we not remove that? Because if you say well, don't kill the pig because it's sentient. If we were to figure out a way to remove the very thing that you define as sentient, is it okay to then kill them, right? Or if something's missing sentience and we could give them sentience, I wanted to know your answer to that. Ought we give something sentience, like the house example I gave?
Well, by killing a pig, you're removing its sentience. So by that nature, you're committing a rights violation. It's a type of death.
No, if I could remove it without killing it, obviously.
Well, it is a type of death. The conscious mind dies. Just because the body is alive, the conscious mind would still be dead. I'd see that as a rights violation.
And what's the conscious mind such that you know that it would die?
Well, it's stated in the hypothetical. I don't have to describe what a conscious mind is. You just outlined it in the hypothetical.
Okay, do you believe in a conscious mind?
Yeah.
And you believe that's separate or independent of strictly mechanistic, neurological, biological reactions?
No, I don't believe it's necessarily independent.
Okay, so if everything was strictly just mechanistic input-output reactivity, how would you determine a value claim about the activity?
I don't know how that would be related.
Well, making a value claim and saying you ought to be sentience, or you ought not remove sentience, or you ought not harm things, I don't understand how you were going to make a distinction between reactivity, again, we're at the beginning, reactivity and consciousness, which is thoughtfulness, mind, right? Mind, if its mind is identical to just brain matter smashing together, then you don't have really much to distinguish between a blade of grass, a Venus flytrap, and a pig, right? There's no threshold in which you determine when sentience begins.
Yeah, so you're kind of equivocating the practical issue of determining sentience in a being versus the hypothetical moral issue of eliminating sentience from a creature. So,
So you think there's a moral issue of just killing a sentient creature?
well, again, the question you asked me is whether or not I'd be fine with removing sentience from a being that's conscious, and I said yes, that would be death of its mind. It's a type of murder.
But it wouldn't know. It wouldn't suffer.
Well, right. I mean, if I shot you in the head with a high-powered rifle and your brains exploded really quickly, you wouldn't suffer either. It's a pretty quick death.
Yeah, I would prefer that kind of death. So what's your point?
You asked me on...
So you think we should shoot pigs with... I agree. Quick deaths right to the head.
No.
I mean, that's kind of what you said.
You asked me whether or not I would find it immoral to remove sentience from a mind, or basically remove a mind. That's
Right.
really what you're saying.
Yeah, and you're saying sentience, the ability to die, feel suffering or pain. If the pig doesn't feel anything, it's like fully lobotomized. I don't know what you would then call suffering if you remove the preconditions for suffering being sentience. It wouldn't suffer
We
at all.
already went through this. I consider, well, the same would be true for humans. So you think it's okay to shoot humans in the head?
No, but shooting them
Right.
and removing their sentience such that they still exist is a different conversation.
So they would not exist.
So then you could eat them.
I like this is just a jumbled mess of nonsense. Like,
It's not
what do you
really.
want to?
If we remove,
Weren't we going to talk about like meta ethics or something?
it is. You're making a moral claim about sentience.
Well, right. So you could remove sentience from a human being by blowing their brains out with a high-powered rifle.
And so why is that bad from your view?
Well, I would consider that a rights violation.
What's a right?
So again, we can
Why
get
is
into
why is
question begging.
Hold on. Why is violating a right immoral?
Sorry?
Why is violating a right immoral?
So, when I say something like rights, I'm using maybe somewhat more of a general term. You could remove somebody's right to, I don't know, smoke weed, something that's...
Or eat
I
fish
don't
in
know.
the woods as a bear.
Yeah, or eat fish, or smoke crack, or, I don't know, any number of things. Like, rights don't necessarily have anything to do with morality or positively affecting
So
a
then
being.
violating a right is
So
not
when
immoral.
I say violating somebody's rights, I'm using a more general term where there's an idea that we ought to codify rights into law that we would want to have, that would protect ourselves, our communities, loved ones, and humanity as a whole.
Why ought we do that?
Sorry?
Why ought we do that?
Well, that's just my preference.
It's my preference to eat pigs.
Okay, great. And we went through this whole fucking rigmarole,
So your
and
whole
you
thing is
refused to
arbitrary.
answer. Right. Well, so we went through this whole rigmarole.
preference.
So again, we've already been through this, and you're just spouting. You're just
means you-
making yourself look foolish.
You mean your arbitrary stance, and your ought just got reduced to arbitrary, right? But yet
Sorry.
your stance is that it's arbitrary. Therefore, your hypothetical where I kill the J people who are not made in the image of God is still not a problem, right? For you?
It is a problem for me.
No, it's a preference, right?
Well, yeah, and
immoral.
it's a problem for me.
Yeah, but it's not immoral. It's just it's
Well,
just like you eating licorice.
think it's immoral since you refuse to answer the question.
So it's just like eating licorice, from your view.
No. For my view, it's much worse than eating licorice. I just explained how this is my preference.
So it's like licorice and ketchup.
Okay, I think there's I think we should explore this difference in value system where correct me if I'm wrong, you believe that if these moral values are extended from a higher power like God, you believe they're meaningful
No.
versus.
Not
No?
necessarily. Meaningful is one term, but I would say any kind of values like morality, right? The good, truth itself. These are metaphysical. They're not like found in nature. They're not identical to objects in the world. And so once we assume them, they need to be grounded somehow. Unless, from your perspective, one, that they're just preferences, but two, which is even a worse position, is that they're just consequences of your brain in action.
Okay, do you believe things like do you believe in the Ten Commandments?
I don't really follow the Ten Commandments as the priority, but why?
Well, okay, I understand that there's some Christians that don't believe in the Ten Commandments because it's an Old Testament value. Like, do you believe in the Golden Rule?
Not as it's currently argued. Not necessarily, no.
Oh,
Because
okay,
the reason is
does God give us any sort of any sort of guidance on what is or isn't moral?
a guidance. Yeah, I would say that's revealed in Scripture, but also in the life of Jesus Christ.
Okay. So what? Okay, so versus my personal preferences, where I think we shouldn't kill humans, we shouldn't kill animals, we shouldn't do things to violate other creatures' rights, all sorts of things like rape, torture, steal. Versus that coming from my personal preferences. Why are my preferences somehow not meaningful,
Because
arbitrary, invalid, whatever words you want to
because
use to describe it?
okay.
Why is that lower than the moral values imposed upon by God?
One, because you have a worldview that assumes just physicality. So any
Not
notion of like
necessarily. I'm agnostic.
okay. Well, if you say something like, truth, assume truth, you assume propositions and logic and consistency, that we ought to be consistent. That itself is a moral claim that your view can't actually ground. But you're saying your worldview is just that it's arbitrary. So I don't have to. So your
When you
opponents don't have to be
okay,
consistent,
well, when
right?
you say ground, I mean, again, you're presupposing that a god did this. Like, I could presuppose a frog did it. Like, I don't know what you mean
You
by
could.
ground. Like, could you explain what you mean by ground?
I mean, let's say establish a source, a meaningful, coherent source for all the preconditions for the way we
Okay,
operate, think,
so
argue, all
infinite
anything.
magical frog,
Uh-huh.
flying spaghetti monster,
Hmm.
magic sky wizard, Santa
Okay.
Claus. Like,
Hmm. Yeah,
I
tell
could
us.
presuppose any of these things, and
Yeah,
I could
do it.
make it logically sensible
Do it. Try
in
it.
some way.
Try it.
But like, what I'm
No, no,
asking
no,
you
no. Hold
is,
on. Hold on. You just tried to counter my position by saying you could just make a water bottle or a magical frog, and you could make it sensible. But that was just an assumption. Let's hear how a
well,
magical
I could give
frog.
them the same properties as your god that you suppose makes any of that grounds, and you still haven't explained to me what ground means.
Well, I told you it's source in a meaningful way that's coherent. You assuming a frog or a spaghetti assumes borrowing
Source in a
from the create.
meaningful way that's coherent, but
Well,
like, wouldn't that be an assumption that it's coherent?
I would say the difference in your examples is that you're borrowing from the physical world.
Okay, you said in a coherent manner, that would be your assumption that it's coherent, correct?
Coherency, no, is not my opinion whether something's
Well,
coherent or not.
it would be your assumption that something's coherent. You like, again, you're a fallible being, correct? So you could be wrong about something being coherent.
And if something was broken in my perception, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
But
you're
it wouldn't
assuming that God is coherent?
go. God is coherent. I think God transcends coherence. He doesn't operate. He's not bound by the laws of logic.
Okay.
As a frog is though, because a frog has finite parts, and you understand the
Not
wholeness
if
of
it's
a
a
frog.
magic infinite frog.
A magic infinite frog. Well, we still know what a frog is, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, there are plenty of origin stories from other cultures that have like magical, immortal animals. Like, I could say, okay, well, God is a magical, infinite frog, and he decided to create human beings and frogs
Okay. How
and
did he
all the other
reveal
animals.
himself?
Like, I
How
mean,
did he reveal himself?
Guys,
well,
we're gonna
have you
have to wrap.
seen frogs? They're all over the place.
Yeah, they're physical and finite.
Okay. Frogs are made in the image of the all frog.
Mhm.
Like, like we keep getting back to this, and I keep proving that you're making all of these assumptions, and you admit that they're not necessarily coherent, and then you're still stuck to this belief that there's this, like, I don't know, magical sky wizard with a beard who brought like his hippie son to talk about peace and love, but somehow not bring cures for diseases, even though he could cure them himself. Like,
Oh,
I
toothache hurt, no God. Toothache hurt. Toothache hurt, no God real. What do you hang out
Yeah.
on Reddit?
So
What's that?
so
My toe hurts. There's no God. What?
we do have to wrap the debate down now. We got to wind it down. I want to give both of you guys an opportunity to give a closing statement on this before we
Okay,
move
sure.
into callers. JimBob, you opened first. I'll let you close first so Vegan
Okay.
Gains can close last. Go ahead.
What was the topic of the debate, Andrew?
Well,
Should we extend
it
human
was
rights?
it
Should we
was
extend human
animal rights. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if that was the topic of the debate, not whether or not God exists, right? The topic of the debate is whether or not we extend animal rights or human rights to animal rights. Now, a human right, I don't actually, he didn't even justify what a human right was. He said he didn't even have to. He didn't make the distinction between reactivity and mind. He couldn't tell me what a mind was, but he also made the claim that if we remove sentience from the animal, we're removing the mind, and that's immoral. And I said, what's a mind? It's really important for anyone who's arguing from this position of sentience. Once they define sentience as the ability to feel or experience, they must distinguish at some point the difference between a blade of grass, a Venus flytrap, a squirrel, a fish, and a bear. Now, if you can't distinguish where that is, right, and you can't tell me what a mind is, and you can't tell me what rights are, there's no possible way you're going to even tell me that we ought to offer up this concept of a human right, by the way, which I reject, to an animal. Now, he's gone as far as saying, we ought to shoot the bear if it's about to eat food. We ought to starve all bears who are trying to eat the fish, right? If we had the capability of doing so. He also said if we make a house sentient, it then now has human rights. We transfer our human rights over to the house, right? This is insanity. I don't even need to say it's insanity because I just let it ring and I let the people listen. As for his little trap with made in the image of God, again, the prediction that I had, which all vegans go to, they bring up, in their view, a logical hypothetical in which you have to deny your worldview so that you accept a new world that you actually don't believe can exist, right? That requires you to be completely inconsistent already by abandoning your view, but then trying to give you a gotcha, as if there's a human being in my worldview that has a yarmulke on and looks like me and speaks like me and shares the energies that human beings all share, that I wouldn't be able that somehow I would know what that person was, right? I mean, a better example, an in-world example, would probably be better off for vegan gains in the future is to use like a really convincing robot or something, right? Where you approach the robot and it was near indistinguishable from human beings. Then how would we test if they were made in the image of God? Now, the problem with his claim of made in the image of God is there would be a test. I would be able to actually interact with these new creatures you call the Jays. And I would determine over time, over knowledge, over knowing them personally, right, of whether or not they're made in the image of God. Now, that process is still irrelevant. The whole hypothetical is irrelevant to whether we extend rights, which have still been totally undistinguished up to now, to animals, right? So we're going to extend human rights to animal rights, but we're also going to intervene with the bear's right to eat, right? The bear's right to eat and feed its family in the natural world. So my worldview is consistent with the natural world, the world we see. Vegan Gains view, I don't even fully know what it is, by the way, because he can't distinguish what a mind is. He can't distinguish where he gets his moral oughts from. He can't distinguish where rights are from. He can't distinguish what a better world is, and he can't tell me whether or not I ought to give some object sentience, right? Because that was the other unanswered part. Should I give an object sentience? If my phone starts to feel and understand the same way in his view, that a human does, now I can't even break this phone. I can't even throw the phone anymore. I'm done.
Thanks for your closing. Go ahead, VG.
Right. So, over the course of the debate, we did end up agreeing on some basic terms such as rights, and we discovered the salient point, the distinction between humans and non-human animals, where he believes it's okay to kill animals, but not human beings, because human beings are made in the image of God. And when I proposed a hypothetical of some humans not being made in the image of God, he just plain refused to answer because he knew exactly what that led to. This entire time, he's been trying to make it seem as though my worldview is ridiculous, insane, absurd. Well, where does his worldview lead to? On nothing but mere assumptions, he would be able to justify wiping out entire races of human beings. He admitted in this debate that he is only making an assumption that God exists. He is only making an assumption that God was made that we were made in God's image. And based on those assumptions, he could wipe out entire races of human beings. He has a genocidal ideology just so that he can justify eating hamburgers. On a whim, he could have the belief that Jews aren't made in God's image. Black people aren't made in God's image. And again, through the course of the debate, he admitted that these are all just assumptions, and anybody could have this assumption. And I'm pretty sure Hitler made a similar assumption that Jews were not made in God's image and Germans were God's chosen people. So when you call my ideology and belief absurd, think about where his beliefs lead to. They lead to genocide. So that's my closing statement.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sticking around, VG.
No problem.
We're going to get to some callers here. Now, I understand this has been contentious. I need you to understand that when the closing arguments are done, people can engage. Sometimes I'll even ask some questions of my own. I'm going to allow the first caller in. Big Hoss, you've been waiting patiently in the background. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead with your question and for who it's for, please.
All right, it is for Vegan Gains. The topic was about if we should eat meat or not, right? There's essential nutrients within animals' flesh and eggs, milk. I mean, why is it if we should? It gives us the essential nutrients and not just cholesterol, but like cooking meat and flesh and all like this. You get real essential nutrients from it that you don't get from plants. Why would you not want humans to get that nutrients?
So an essential nutrient is a nutrient that we cannot synthesize ourselves and we need to get from an external source. Cholesterol is not an essential nutrient. There are no essential nutrients in animals that we cannot get from plant or fungal or other sources. B12 is really the only nutrient that is typically only found in animals. We can synthesize B12, however, take a B12 supplement. As for all our other sources of nutrition, vitamin D, vitamin A, all the minerals we need, we can get that purely from plants. I'd recommend you read the paper from the American Dietetics Association on vegan diets. They're the largest nutrition organization in the world, and they state in their peer-reviewed paper that people of all ages from pregnancy to adulthood can live perfectly fine on a purely plant-based diet. And it also confers health benefits like reduction of heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, lower risk of obesity, and some forms of cancer. And I can get enough protein. So there you go.
Did you have a follow-up for that, Haas?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to trust like lab grown. Like it's too much. It seems like it's too much energy wasting to go into build a laboratory, make the lab paste, and bioengineer more. Just destroying a lot of like I don't understand.
Are you
It's just
talking
more simple
about
to raise.
test tube meat, or are you talking about like synthesizing vitamins?
Synthesizing sounds like synthetic. I mean, because like
Well,
you
it
can't like
is. You know, we give vitamins to animals, right? A lot of animals can develop B12 deficiencies if they're not getting enough cobalt from the soil. They can have issues with too low iodine because certain areas are low in iodine. So we need to give animals that we eat supplements so that they can live and grow. We also give them hormones so they grow faster.
supplements.
So
Yeah, no, I mean, like supplements are fine. There's not. I mean, like I take iodine supplements and stuff like that as well.
sure.
There's nothing wrong with like some supplements, but I mean, like you'd want like a healthy animal, I'm sure. So I mean, like you just raise it yourself, you grow it, you basically like a plant. I mean, of the earth, it's natural. You don't have to build a factory or a laboratory and create the toothpaste and eat the tube.
I'm not totally understanding what you mean. If we're talking like again, if we're talking about environmental issues, if you read Chapter 5, page 76 of the UN's latest climate report, we could make more food than we currently are today while using less land by switching to a purely plant-based food system while providing enough nutrition for the world's population. So we could feed the population that would be expected to be in place by 2050, which I think is 12 billion, something like that, or 10 billion, while using less land than we currently use today, merely by switching to plant-based agriculture while reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. That's because plant-based agriculture produces far more yields than animal-based agriculture. We actually need to grow plants to feed to animals. That's why soybean production has exploded because of the popularity of meat, particularly beef.
That just seems more the case that we've like degraded the soil and just destroyed everything instead of just living with the land. To me, but
Okay,
I
well,
guess I
only
could go on that.
30%. Okay, well, like cows can only eat off of forage. If we're not going to feed them, soybeans and corn, only about 30% of the only about 30% of the beef supply that we're consuming right now could be sustained using purely forage.
It doesn't have
This
to be
is
just
your
cows. I mean,
this
like
your
you could
sorry,
like
I'm sorry to cut in, caller, but this is your
no,
last
you're good.
follow-up. So before we get to the other calls, so go ahead with your last follow-up here.
I'll just say this: you don't have to have like cows for everything, wherever it's like that. I guess cows could be an example, but I mean, like pigs, chickens. I mean, like you can just ducks. You could have like a lake or catfish or fish. It's just it doesn't matter to me. It just doesn't have to be just cows, but that's all.
Appreciate very much your call. And looks like we've got resident carrot cruncher sleeper. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure if this was discussed because I had to tune out of the debate for a moment, but my question is for vegan. If you were in a situation where you had to kill an animal to save your own life, would you do that?
So, I would say no, but in survival circumstances, I understand. I've seen what people do in survival circumstances. A lot of shit that they otherwise wouldn't be willing to do. It does affect your mind. So I would say no.
You said yes
Um,
before when I asked you, though.
No, you didn't ask me that. In a context where like I'm sort of starving on a deserted island and there's only a cow to eat, I would say no.
Okay, but that's
If
not
I
the
could
question.
kill carnivorous animals, like I don't know, dogs or wolves or something, who are going to kill other animals, then sure, I'd probably do that.
So if a carnivorous animal was going to attack you, you would kill it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Would you go to prison for that?
No,
Why not?
Well, two reasons. One, we haven't codified animal rights into law, and again, if you're going to make that argument, that's, again, question begging. And two, if it's self-defense, then, again, in human context, if a human were trying to kill me and I shot and killed them, I wouldn't go to jail.
How can you prove it was if it was self-defense against a wolf?
How could I prove it was self-defense against a wolf? Well, again, you'd have to either look at evidence or take somebody based off their word. If there were video evidence, then that would be the easiest way to establish. If there's other sources of evidence like footprints, tracks, blood splatter patterns, I don't know exactly what you're trying to ask me.
But Vegan Gains, if the wolf, you said you would intervene with the wolf eating the fish. Now, if the wolf, in the wolf's view, you intervening would be the wolf hurting you or killing you because you're trying to stop it from eating its food is probably considered self-defense. If you extend rights to animals.
No, killing and eating somebody is not self-defense.
What, a fish? A fish is somebody?
So yeah, it's a conscious being.
Oh, the consciousness, the thing you couldn't distinguish what consciousness was.
Well, we could, and we agreed upon a definition of consciousness.
I don't think we did. I was
we did.
trying to get. Oh,
Let me get back to the caller here.
It's okay. I have no further questions. It just seemed very incoherent to me. Have a good night.
You too. Take care. Bent, you're on the line. Can you hear us okay, Bent? Bent, are you there?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Do you guys hear any echoes?
No echoes.
No? Okay, great. So, I'm trying to get my questions here, but basically, in short, like I pretty much agree with JimBob. Like I'm also a theist as well, but I'm also not a vegan. So my question to you as Vegan Gang is that somewhere around your actual line of thinking, right? I was watching some of your streams and stuff. You're actually an antinatalist, right?
I'm not a hard antinatalist. I think there's a lot of people who shouldn't have children, but I think good parents who want to have children certainly should have a right to have children.
Okay, so my question to you is, as a vegan, you know that like by simply existing, you had to cause suffering for the mass gathering of food
I
production.
care about rights violations, not necessarily causing harm. So yeah, there's some degree of harm that you may cause. That's not necessarily a rights violation.
You're violating the animal's rights that's being harmed by your existence.
No.
What? That's not a problem to you? So that's not an inconsistency?
Can you give me an example of a way I would harm an animal that would violate its rights?
So the animal lived in a particular patch of land, right?
Okay.
And so you need to actually extend more land for more population to come in. So you keep doing that over and over. You reach the point where you reach their land, right? And so that's their land. They want to live in that particular ecosystem. And so you're actually affecting that animal's ability to live a fruitful life in that particular place. Okay, so it's also being affected by your actual advancement for human participation in life.
Right.
And so you're going to be violating the animal's freedom to actually live a life it wants to live.
Yeah, so I am not convinced that, say, developing new farmland or developing new housing is causing an excess amount of animal deaths, let's say. Where's the evidence?
What? So you think when you harvest food, there is a zero-death food harvestation in the process?
I'm sure there's animals that die, but can you provide me any evidence that there are more deaths in, say, like a square mile of cornfield versus a square mile of wilderness?
That's not the point. The point is that one death is a death.
Okay, can you provide me evidence that there are more deaths in a square mile of cornfield versus a square mile of wilderness?
You have to wrap it up with your last follow-up.
Okay.
Caller.
Well, I'm not necessarily why you keep asking. It's not the point. The point is that a particular harm is being done, whether it's like an inch or a square
If there's
mile.
no more harm being done, then why would I care?
No, there is harm being done.
Okay, if there's no more harm being
Well,
done, why would I care? Are there more deaths that
well,
occur? Are there
are
more
you
rights
harvesting food?
violations that occur in a square
I'm
mile of
sorry,
cornfield
Andrew.
versus a
I'm
square
sorry.
mile of wilderness?
I just think Vegan Games doesn't understand, and it's going to go on. But
Well,
the thing
no,
is
you
that
don't
1
understand. You're
inch,
trying to claim that I'm contributing to rights violations. Prove to
you're
me.
killing the animal in your harvestation process. That's the freaking point.
Okay, so if there were humans
How
that
do you
ran
not
in front of a
understand this
tractor,
basic
okay,
concept?
okay,
Hang on,
cool.
caller,
Okay,
listen.
all right.
First of all,
Okay,
you have to give him a chance to respond. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
right. Go ahead.
okay, so there are a certain amount of human deaths that occur in transportation. I think in Canada alone, it's somewhere around 35,000 per year. By driving a car, are you committing murder? Are you violating other human beings' rights? If somebody were to jump in front of your fucking car because they're an idiot or they couldn't see traffic signals, are you a murderer now? Are you violating rights on that basis? Should you kill yourself because you could kill another human being or multiple people over the decades in which you might be using a car?
I'm not a vegan, so I think that humans should have rights
Oh,
to
okay. So you
choose
think it's
food.
okay to murder people? Is that where you're going with? Like your
No, that
ideas are
you have to be
completely
consistent with your
incoherent, and
message.
it's so silly that you're trying to criticize me.
I'm sorry too that I had to cut you off there, caller. I do appreciate the call in. Appreciate it very much. I just have to get some other callers. A question did come to my mind, VG, if you don't mind
Sure.
humoring me. If your dog, if you own a
Yeah,
dog,
I have 3 dogs.
yeah, if your dog ran off in the middle of the night, would you go try to find it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you be violating its rights by bringing it back home because it tried to purposely separate itself from you, just like if a human being ran out of your home and you did the same?
So, yes, you could see that as a rights violation, but you would likely prevent greater rights violations. So, that dog could end up getting ripped apart by coyotes or wolves. It could end up dying of starvation or disease. It could end up killing other animals. I think, especially in cases of cats, that would be a huge risk. But dogs also kill and eat other animals. And the dog might not realize that it would perhaps have a preference to live at home with you because it has survival advantages. It just doesn't have the intelligence to realize that. So, yeah, you could see it as a rights violation, but it prevents a greater degree of rights violations, sort of like forcing vaccine mandates. You're violating somebody's rights by forcing them to take a vaccine, but you're also preventing a deadly disease from being spread, which would kill I don't know how many people, like say in cases of smallpox, where people were literally held at gunpoint when smallpox vaccinations were first discovered.
Yeah, it just the last thing before I get to the next caller. Would you agree with me though that if like my wife ran out and didn't want to come home and I went and collected her and brought her home against her will and then used as a defense, that I thought it would stop greater rights violations, that they would throw me in prison anyway?
Well, if you could prove that, say, your wife was a psychotic murderer and she was like, I don't know, maybe going out with a machine gun to a shopping mall, I think you probably could make a good case that you were totally justified. If that's not the case, then yeah, if you just brought your wife home because, you know, she hated you, left, and then you brought her home, yeah, that's kidnapping.
Gotcha. Zen, thanks for the call in. Appreciate it. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah. You hear me?
Yeah. We got a lot of callers tonight, so if you could be very brief, I'd appreciate it. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll be as quick as I can. So forgive the line of inquiry if it's like graphic or whatever, but it was actually sparked by somebody in your community, Vegan Gains. They put out this tweet that was something along the lines of that it's more preferable for somebody to have sex with an animal than to kill it and eat it.
Yeah, I remember that tweet. That was Mouthy retweeted that, didn't he?
Yeah. Would you affirm that, Vegan Gains? It would be more of a rights violation to kill and eat the cow than to have sex with it.
Well, yeah, I suppose so, because you'd be taking away any experience it could possibly have,
right.
Positive or negative, versus if you have sex with it, it's still able to live and, you know, enjoy life to some extent at least.
So if I were to give you two scenarios, like one being the current state of the world where most people are comfortable with, you know, killing and eating animals for food, or another world where instead of people doing that, they did not kill and eat the animals, but instead they had sex with the animals. That would be more preferable to you. That world.
Yeah, that'd be more preferable.
Okay.
By the
No
way, I should
further
also
questions, Your
note.
Honor.
By the way, I should also note that people have sex with animals in order to produce meat. You have to sexually stimulate pigs in order to impregnate them. You literally deliberately sexually stimulate them and try to get them to orgasm in order to impregnate them. You have to insert your fist and into a cow's vagina and an anus again in order to inseminate them. So bestiality does actually occur to facilitate meat production.
Vegan Gains, another caller called in and said, asked you about a bear chasing you and you defending yourself, and you said you wouldn't kill it.
No, I said I would.
Oh, you would kill it.
Yeah.
Oh, you would kill it. Okay, gotcha.
All right. Askareth, you've been waiting very patiently. Thank you so much for the call in. Can you hear us okay?
I think so. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead with your question and who it's for.
Great. Yeah, no, this is to I think Vegan Gains getting
Yeah, he's been getting mocked
getting
pretty
all
good by
of the-
callers
yeah,
tonight,
all the
basically.
hard-
But go
all of
ahead,
the hard,
man.
yeah, no, all the hard questions. So, I guess one of the big questions is like, do you not like recognize, at the very least, in the realm of sentience, right? Because what I've seen from a lot of vegans is they rely heavily on the word sentience to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Do you not recognize like a hierarchy of like
Yeah, there
there
is.
is a significant difference, right, between the level of quote unquote sentience or experience or reaction with the outside world that, for example, a bug has versus the what's usually described as sapience, right?
Yeah,
Our
certainly.
awareness that we are aware, right?
Certainly,
Um,
yes.
Right. And so do you not understand how that might also be like a meaningful difference if we
It is a
do put
meaningful
that on a
difference.
hierarchy?
So it is a meaningful difference, and again, all these things are going to end up being based on preferences. Where you draw the line might be higher up than somebody else, but we can run a reductio. Say a human being was as sentient as a ladybug. Would you be okay with taking those human beings and turning them into hamburgers?
Okay, well, I guess that's what your thing is. So I'm okay. So like in your world, if that's where you
Well,
would
if
do that,
if
that's
if you're
how you
going to
would
talk
that's how you
about
would resolve that.
sentience, well, if you're going to talk about
Okay.
sentience and the degree to which something is sentience gives it moral value, and you have like a cutoff, like below a certain level, it's okay to kill, above a certain level, it's not okay to kill. Like again, we can run the reductio like on a human being if that's the salient point,
So
and
my
you,
right,
yeah.
okay, yeah, sorry. You're right. So you run that reductio, and that's how you do it. But do you not kind of also understand like the application of like the property as something inherent to either a species or a kind of animal or a type of category, for example, like human, like ladybug, like whatever, and that by virtue of being part of that category, that is also applied to that because there's no meaningful way to distinguish between members of that same species.
Well, if you're going to talk about like the species normality concept, most of the group have this property. Therefore, if a part of that group does not have that property, you still apply the same principles that the rest of the group would have. Okay, let's suppose 51% of the human species had the sentience of a ladybug. Would it be okay to kill the highly sentient humans that have, the sentience of a normal human, but because the majority of the human species had the sentience of a ladybug? Do you think those same principles that you would apply to the humans that are as sentient as a ladybug, would you apply the same principles to the highly sentient humans? Like, would you be okay with like stepping on them and crushing them with like a hydraulic press?
Honestly, I think the world that you've just created is way more similar to your hypothetical that you did with some humans not being made in the image of God than anything that JimBob ever said. Now, I know that might seem like a bit of a dodge, but like if that were the case of that universe, right? This is a completely different thing that we don't live in, and and this the normality of the species normality, I would probably still think that a lot of people would be willing to apply the same principle to the entire species anyway, because even by looking at it, even by whatever, there's still that level of uncertainty. Well, maybe there's some sort of thing where these humans possess
Well,
that
in the
property that allows
hypothetical,
them
you
to
have
achieve that
certainty.
higher
We're
state of
testing your
consciousness as
moral
opposed to-
values.
Huh?
It's assumed in the hypothetical we have 100% certainty because we're testing your moral values. So in the hypothetical, let's say the normal state of a human species is to have the sentience of a ladybug, but there's a small percentage of human beings that are highly sentient. Would you be okay with crushing those highly sentient human beings with a hydraulic press because you wouldn't mind doing that to the other human beings that had the sentience of a ladybug?
I would imagine that the ones that quote unquote had the sentience of a ladybug were also, because they are the members of the human species, would also be able to produce humans that did not. So that also kind of should probably factor into this whole thing, this kinship relationship that we have with these people.
I'm sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry to cut in.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
But we can't have a full-on second debate.
Yeah. Okay. I got you.
So if you don't mind, go ahead with whatever your last portion of this is, so we can move to the next caller.
Okay. All right. So I guess this is kind of
Okay, well, wait. We could run that hypothetical. Okay, let's say the majority of the human species had the sentience of a ladybug. Only the highly intelligent human beings were able to actually breed highly intelligent human beings. The ladybug people would only be able to breed ladybug people, but the highly sentient human beings would be able to breed ladybug people and highly sentient beings. Would you be okay with exterminating the wait. Let's say both of them. Let's say both of them can produce highly sentient beings. Would you would not kill either because they could possibly both produce highly sentient beings?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate the call in, Asperoth. Have a good day.
Vegan. Oh, sorry. One short question. I'll be really quick. Vegan.
Sure.
I went to the extreme with the removing of sentience or adding it. But if there was a gradient, would you be in favor of partially reducing the sentience of things such that other animals could eat? Let's say in the bear scenario or the wolf scenario, that you reduce the sentience of the fish so that the wolf could then eat the fish and you wouldn't have a problem with it because it's closer to like grass or something.
If we were to make engineer a species, I'd be fine with that, I believe. Yeah.
So partial lobotomy almost.
Well, no, taking a sentient fish or a normally sentient deer, removing that, taking out a chunk of its brain, putting it back into the wild. I'm not in favor of that, but the idea of, say, engineering prey species that mimic like a deer, but they're actually not sentient. They're basically machines.
Like robot with protein pasted
Kind
on.
of, yeah. I'd be fine with that. But again, that's kind of in a vacuum. I don't know how they'd compete with the sentient beings in that ecosystem. But yeah, in a vacuum, in principle, I'd say that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Donatus, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead with your question, man.
Yeah, my question was for JimBob. I think I asked it in a super chat. I don't know if it went through or not, but I wanted to ask it in person. So with this NTT thing, I know you and Posh are going down the route of saying, made in the image of God as that particular trait. But why is, I feel like that route might be a bit too nebulous. Why wouldn't you go down the route of just human nature instead and just say we have human nature, that is what grants us the dignity and puts us above the other species?
I think human nature, the problem with that from my view is that human nature is also fallen. So there's an aspect of us that the natural properties we have or something like that doesn't actually get us to the point of making an absolute or a moral position on the matter. So just because it basically begs the question, well, what is human nature? Where is that derived from? So I would include human nature from the theological perspective. It would be included, but it wouldn't be identical. And so when we say image of God, this NTT thing usually tries to call forth a particular or a set of particulars. That's why they go to like sentience or intelligence or properties of nature. But made in the image of God is a transcendental category itself. So it's not even you couldn't even grab a collection of things and remove some or add some. That's why the question of well, if there were these other people, right? Well, that's begging the question, what's a person, right? From my view, a personhood, energies of a person, the category itself of human. Now, I could probably defend NTT with just the category of human, right? Right, just say human without even the nature part. So I mean that you might have a point there if you just go with human, the category, and say I'm a speciesist, right? I'm just a speciesist.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way in which our individual personal traits are even grounded is through our human nature. So that would be like the compilation of everything. And you wouldn't be able to, because like human nature isn't identical to like our ability to use logic or even our physicality or our nose or whatever. Like it's the totality of humanness itself, which I think I just feel like it'd be a good it would be a good way to do it. And that way
I think that's good.
They're not very like, and I'm not trying to insult vegan gains or anyone here, but like most people aren't that well versed in Christianity, right? When you say something like made in the image of God, it seems
they don't know. Yeah, no, I understand. I understand.
Yeah, nature. It could be nebulous too, but I feel like just saying like humanness, human nature, I feel like it's a lot easier for them to understand where we're coming from.
Well, we could say we could probably go with personhood or mind because you know, through this debate, there was no point in which my opponent actually justified mind, but he assumed the mind. He used the word mind, consciousness, sentience, and so mind itself is in question. Like, what is mind if not just the physical result of a process of the brain, which is a mechanism, right? So you don't get mind or knowledge or morality from strictly mechanical processes, but and so that's why now Vegan Gains, I'll give him credit at the end, was agnostic about physicalism, but I really don't see how a worldview without God could actually justify mind or personhood or things like dignity.
Last follow up, Donatus.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I would agree with that totally. Like when you guys bring up that mechanistic argument, it rings very true. And like Jay Dyer always says, the determinist fallacy, which you did bring up today, JimBob, where you can't actually know it if everything is determined. And if you can't know things and you're making all these knowledge claims about ethical principles and all these other things, well, then you've already lost the debate because you can't actually know these things. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate the call in very much. Tristana, you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead with your question.
Tristana.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. It's nice to see you guys, Vegan Gains and JimBob. It was a good debate, very, very lively, at times less lively. Half of it was quite lively for most of it, and the other half was a little bit subdued and a little bit tired. But I've got a question for both of you guys. Let's start out with JimBob. JimBob, do you believe in anything that's non-physical? Like, do you believe in non-physical realities?
Yes, I do.
And Vegan Gains?
Agnostic. I haven't seen any evidence towards it.
Evidence would be physical, right?
Great.
Sorry,
yeah, anything that's non-physical.
Evidence doesn't necessarily need to be physical, but I just haven't seen any evidence for it.
So you don't, JimBob, you think there is evidence for the existence of non-physical things?
Yeah, I would say in my worldview, faith itself is evidence. And so things like laws of logic, information, meaning, reason, all of the things that are actually required to even dabble in empiricism or science or what we call hard evidence or whatever. The fact that we even engage is to argue that those things don't exist is silly. Now, when we talk about existence, I don't say they exist in the same way a banana exists, but they exist. And so I feel like this question of existence from a different worldview, people think it means like it's on the table or you need evidence for it. So there's a distinction there in the realm of existence.
Okay. Yeah. And so Vegan Gains, as somebody who doesn't believe in things that are non-physical,
I didn't say that. I said I was agnostic.
Oh, you're agnostic. You don't know if non-physical things exist. Do you believe in rights?
Well, yeah.
What are rights?
Again, we defined it during the debate, and I think we agreed upon it.
I rejected rights.
You did? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, rights are just They could either be moral principles or restrictions that are meant to encourage pro-social behaviors that are codified into law, that are protected by people and its governments and institutions.
Okay, so is that a physical thing?
Well, no, ideas are not necessarily physical things. Like again, like it just goes into a whole idea of what is consciousness, what are ideas. Like there are electrical signals snapping in my brain right now to produce these thoughts. Are thoughts merely a merely a total of all those things going on in my brain, or is there some spirit realm? I don't know.
Okay, well, are rights a physical thing?
Well, no, again, they're concepts.
Do you believe in non-physical things?
I said I'm agnostic.
Okay, thanks.
Like, an idea
interesting answer.
isn't necessarily, like, I don't know what you mean by non-physical
Are you
things.
agnostic
like,
about rights?
well, no, what's being argued here is what is a thing? I think that's, like, the topic of contention. Like, what makes a thing a thing?
No, I'm asking you if you believe in non-physical things, and you said you're agnostic. You've never seen evidence for them. Then I asked you if you believe in rights, and
Can you give
said
me
yes.
an example of a non-physical thing?
7.
Rights.
Okay, so rights are a thing.
From your worldview, they are.
Well, I don't know what you mean by thing.
JimBob, will you please, in Jordan
Like-
Peterson voice, repeat his answer?
Well, it's
Depends on what you mean by thing.
Like, I don't know if you guys are talking about, like, a spirit realm, or if there's, like, a mind outside a body, or if you're, like, is the idea of the number 7, like, is that a... Do we consider that a, like, something that exists? Or
Well,
is
let's
it just
let's
a
take it in
concept
this direction.
that's
You
generated
mentioned
by mind?
when I asked you for the definition of rights, you mentioned morality. Do you believe morality objectively exists?
No, morality doesn't objectively
Do
exist.
you
It's
believe
mind
that rights
dependent by
are
definition.
do you believe that rights objectively exist?
No, it's mind
Okay.
dependent. Do you know what objective means?
So you just had a how long of a debate? What was this? Almost 2 hours. You had a debate on something that you don't believe exists, and you arguing for the
I
affirmative that we could
didn't
extend,
say
should you
that.
believe that we should
I did
extend
not
human
say
rights?
that. I did not say that.
Oh.
You're misquoting me. I didn't say I
You just
don't
said-
believe rights exist. I just said that I believe they're subjective.
You believe they don't objectively exist, and you just argued.
Okay, wait. Can you
almost
give me an
2
argument
hours.
for... No, wait. Prove to me that rights exist independent of the mind. Prove to
We
me
don't
that
believe in
any of
rights.
these concepts, like the number 7, exist independent of the mind.
What's a mind?
Can you define mind, please?
Does a mind
How about you
exist?
define mind? You define mind for me.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate.
Okay,
You know, just one more
you're-
thing. One more thing.
You're ridiculous.
One more thing. All right, so it's it's almost like you've had this debate before, isn't it? So I've got one more statement to make about the and it comes with a question as well, if you don't mind. I'm sorry to eat up so much time here. Zen brought up a really interesting point, and I thought Vegan Gain's answer was very telling about the state of the vegan community, the state of their where they're coming from and their beliefs. And I just wanted to throw this out there. Peter Singer in 2001 actually wrote an article called
He's
Heavy
not vegan.
Petting.
He is not
Peter
vegan.
Singer.
Peter
is an
Singer
animal
isn't
rights
vegan.
advocate.
He's an animal
Okay,
rights
did I say-
advocate, but he's
excuse
not
me, sir,
vegan.
excuse-
Doesn't matter,
Mr.
though.
Gaines, Mr. Gaines, I didn't say he was vegan.
You said he's vegan. He's not vegan. He's an animal rights advocate, but he's not vegan.
I did not
He's
say
not
he was vegan.
a.
Peter
didn't say he
Singer
was
wrote
vegan.
an article.
He said
Peter
he's from the
Singer-
vegan community. He's not from the vegan community.
I
just
said
wanna
from
make
the
that
vegan
clear.
Community. I said your answer is very telling on where the vegan community is coming from and where it's going. Now, my point is that Peter Singer in 2001 wrote this article called Heavy Petting. It was published in, I think, right there it is, April 2001. And he's a philosopher who talks about animal liberation, and many of his arguments are quite popular in the vegan movement. Now,
He's
Vegan
not an
Gains-
he's no, they're not. He's not an abolitionist. He's a welfarist. He's not vegan, and his ideas aren't popular in the vegan movement. If you
Oh, they're
ask
very
most
popular in the
vegans who
vegan
know
movement,
who Peter
sir.
Singer is, they think he's a fucking wacko. He's also being banned from university campuses because he had the idea that it's okay to kill children who are like 4 or 5 years old if they
So you think
disappoint you,
that's
so
okay?
long as you replace them.
Don't
Why
you
is
think
that
it's
wrong
okay
from
to?
your view? Why is that wrong
Sorry?
from your view? Why is that wrong from your view? You
I
said
think we've
preference.
established
That it's
why I
preference.
think it's wrong from my worldview
That it's
through
preference.
the course of the debate.
That it's
Okay,
preference.
And
can
it's
I,
your
can I just finish
preference.
what I
Hang
was
on,
saying? I
guys,
wasn't
we
saying that
can't,
he's
we
a
can't
vegan.
hang on this for too much longer. Tristan,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
wrap it
If I
up.
could just, thanks, Andrew. I'm sorry. I just
No
want to
problem.
say, I agree with you that Peter Singer is not vegan. Was never really vegan. Totally not vegan. Probably the least vegan person. Tremendously not vegan. He's not vegan, but his ideas about heavy petting that he puts forward in his article here concern bestiality that you just justified. Vegan Gains, do you think consensual?
I didn't justify bestiality.
Vegan Gains, do you
I
think
said it
it's
was morally preferable over murder. I didn't say
You
it was morally
justified it in relation
justified.
to murder. Okay, thank you.
No, go on. Keep straw manning me. I love it.
It's not a straw man. I'm asking you, okay, forget everything I just said. Vegan Gains, here. Forget everything I said about Peter Singer. I'm not trying to upset you, but I just
This
want
guy's
a
wasting our
clear
fucking
answer.
time. Like,
just
say what you want to
want a
say.
clear
Just say
answer.
what you fucking want to
Last
say.
thing
Stop
he's got
wasting
to
our
say.
time.
I just want a clear answer. Do you think consensual bestiality between animals and human beings is morally permissible?
If an animal were capable of giving informed consent, then yes. So if
What
there were
if a
another,
dog, okay, so dogs that hump your leg, is that consent? If a dog humps
Whoa,
you?
whoa, whoa,
hump your
whoa!
leg?
Hang on, hang on.
this
Back up,
is
back,
this
back
is
up,
getting
back up,
stupid.
back up.
You
That's-
just said that it's okay.
Can't apes
I didn't
sign?
say it's okay. You fucking
Can an ape
idiot.
sign?
Can't apes sign?
Ape sign, yeah. Well, no, unfortunately, the Coco thing is nonsense. But if that were the case, yeah, they'd have to.
So if an
I
ape,
just said informed, enthusiastic consent. A
Oh,
dog cannot give, as far as we understand a dog's mind, give informed, enthusiastic consent.
but an
But
ape
if they
can't
could,
sign.
you're okay with that? Interspecies
If there
relation?
were extremely intelligent dogs or horses or something,
Apes.
and they could, then yeah, we do
What
the
about an
same thing
ape?
with human beings.
What about an elephant?
We
that
do
can
the
write
same
yes?
thing with human beings. There are human
Vegan
beings who
gains.
can't give informed consent.
When a
Those
dog
are
is
usually
playing
children,
fetch-
mentally disabled
Unfortunately,
people.
we can't continue
I-
on it. Unfortunately, Tristan, I have to move on to the next call. I appreciate the call in though very much. Have a good night, man.
Later, guys.
Yeah. And then we have one more call before we get to super chats. Doomer Duck, go ahead.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you for waiting so patiently. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Andrew. Longtime caller, first time listener.
Go ahead.
I just have a question for JimBob. I was wondering if, and I don't mean to open up a can of worms. If you don't have any response, that's fine. But do you have any secular reasons why animals can't have rights, and why humans, as opposed to just saying they're made in the image of God, why they have the right not to be killed and eaten, for example?
I don't believe in rights.
Okay, so you think it's
that's
okay to
not
torture
preferable.
animals?
No, that's not a matter of rights.
Okay, so do you think animals should have rights codified into law that prevent them from getting tortured? Let's say, like somebody torturing their pet dog, skinning them alive, putting them in dog fights.
Well, I mean, I'm talking to vegans, so what we define as torture might change. So I would have to.
Okay, skinning
look
a
at it.
dog alive or throwing it in a fire when it's fully conscious and letting it burn to death.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I think that would probably.
Okay,
be...
do you think rights should be codified into law that would protect them from that action?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. I'm the crazy one apparently, but he
You
thinks people should have the right to throw their dogs in a fire. Okay.
Well, you're actually asking a different question: whether there should be consequences, not whether there should be rights that stop that from happening, because that's not how.
Well,
it
they
works.
do stop that from happening. Rights do have an preventive effect.
Well, that's a different debate.
Did you have a follow-up with that, Doomer?
Well, that doesn't really answer the question. That I use the word right by accident. Yeah. I don't mean to say right, but
I think you mean secular reasons for why you wouldn't give animals
secular reasons is just preference.
Exactly.
That's all it is. It's all just preference.
Okay, so would you have a preference in that case?
I don't know. I'm not secular. I think it's an absurd position.
You have no personal preferences.
No. Deriving like moral considerations from preference is absurd.
Okay.
I could prefer one thing or the other. That doesn't tell me whether I ought
Okay.
to do something.
If God were to tell you himself, it's good to rape children, would you personally prefer not to rape children and still see that as morally wrong in your view?
No, I would reject that was God.
Okay. Oh my God, this guy is just.
What? That's
I
a
can't
perfectly
even.
fine answer.
Okay, no. If that were God and he could prove it to you, and he
How
said
would he do
child rape
that?
is good.
How do you do that?
Well, he's God, right? He can do anything, so he'd prove it to you.
How?
What do you mean he's God? He's beyond reason. He's beyond logic. He's all powerful. So God proved to you that he's God, and he said child rape is good.
Yeah,
Would you still have a personal preference
That's why
to
I
not
asked
rape
the question to
children?
Start with. I don't mean to interrupt, but it keeps divagating into a theological debate. If
Every
it's-
debate's theological.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Well, there's
He literally just admitted he bases his moral principles on preferences. So I think
That's
that
your
answers
whole
question,
worldview,
dude.
you retard.
Yeah, that's your whole worldview. You don't
No.
care what God thinks. I just proved that. I
You
just
idiot.
proved you do not care what God would think.
You're
you
an
form your
idiot.
own fucking preferences.
all right. Doomer,
Malformed question.
we appreciate the call.
Okay, buddy. Do you still
Appreciate it
believe
very
Santa
much.
Claus exists?
No.
Uh-huh. Okay. But God exists, right? He can give you presents.
they're in the same category.
Yeah, they
You're
are.
a retard.
Yeah, they are. Your parents told you about it, right? Your parents
a
told you about it,
retard.
right? Your parents taught you about it, right? When you were a little kid?
No, actually, I rejected God from my parents, and I reclaimed it through other methods.
Oh, okay.
You retard.
So you grew up
Houses
and then
have
you became
rights?
dumber somehow.
Okay. Houses have rights.
Right,
Jail-
you grew up
jail
and you
the
became
whale.
dumber somehow. You literally relearned to believe in Santa Claus, but I'm the
Arrest the
idiot.
bears. Starve the bears.
All right. Enough. We got to move on to the super
Starve
chats.
the bears.
It got pretty contentious, I must admit. Okay, so first and foremost, I thought this was a pretty funny question. Came in from Southern Dingo, sends in a $5 super chat and says, vegan gains, is pussy considered meat? And if so, how often should one eat it? It's just kind of funny.
Sorry, what is considered meat?
He said, is pussy considered
Never
meat?
heard of it.
Oh,
And how often should
as
one
much
eat
as
it?
fucking possible, dude.
Oh,
Gotta make the
okay.
wife happy.
Okay. 2.2 acres and a bear sent in a $5 super chat and said, so if we extend the same rights to animals and one decides to attack and eat us, do we just lay down and get eaten, or do the animals abide by the law?
No, certainly not. There are human beings that don't abide by the law, and there are circumstances where there are human beings who can't be held accountable for their actions due to like mental illness. It would be reasonable in a situation like that to use self-defense and lethal use of self-defense if necessary. So you do have rights, and you have a right to life. You have a right to protect yourself. So
What's a right?
if a bear attacked you, we've already gone over this. So
You haven't actually distinguished what a right is.
well, I have multiple times. You just ignore it, and then you just go on a fucking spiel about how you think it's okay to throw a fucking dog into a fire. So whatever, dude.
Let's try to, if we can, we'll try to address the questions to the person so we can get through all of them. I understand there's still going to be some back and forth. I'm okay with that, but let's keep it,
Yeah,
somewhat
sure.
brief if we can. 2.2 acres and a bear also sent in another $5 and says, gains, so you'd stop the coyote from eating the deer. The coyotes starve and die off. Explain the chain reaction that would follow. Now, I was actually thinking that as the debate was going off as well, that there is an equilibrium to nature. And if you kill off all the predators, you're going to have a big problem in another direction. Even just mice would become very problematic, right?
Yeah, so it depends on the ecosystem. Again, I'm in favor of killing carnivorous animals if it leads to a reduction in rights violations. If it so happens that taking away all predatory animals like coyotes, wolves would lead to like mass starvation, all the animals in the ecosystem die, I wouldn't be in favor of that. But there are ecosystems like Yellowstone National Park that were doing just fine without wolves.
You said you would starve the bear population by intervening with them eating
I
fish.
I gave you the situation in which I'd be in favor of that. But I'm ridiculous. Starving bears, right? Throwing dogs into fires. Yeah, you're much better. Okay.
Redfish Bear sent in a $20 super chat and he said nothing, which my favorite kind of super chat. Reverend Coffin's other son sent in a $10 super chat and said he just wanted to show some love to the channel. We appreciate that. Whom Do You Serve sent in a $5 super chat and said this is for JimBob, not a dime to the soy. Why do they all sound the same? The voice of the soy is unbearable. Well, Emmanuel sent in a $10.30 super chat. I used to be easily fooled by charisma, smugness, calmness, using fancy words and claims with no good justification, emotional appeals, etc. Not so easy anymore, thanks to channels like The Crucible. Appreciate that very much. Adult Small Bear sent in a $5 super chat. Are you okay with burnt offering billions of small animals to obtain your vegetables?
Yeah, so depends on the circumstances. The circumstances that exist right now, there is not an increased rights violation by harvesting vegetables. I have not seen any evidence that there are more deaths that occur in, say, a square mile of cornfield or soybean field versus what would otherwise occur in nature.
Does a crab have a right?
Does a crab have a right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
crab.
no, they currently don't have rights codified into law.
Would you would give them rights though? Are they sentient enough?
Yeah, they're sentient enough where I would want to protect them from at least certain things. They are carnivorous, at least most of them, I believe. So it kind of, like, again, some of these things depend.
So when is I didn't get the answer of when the shift between sentience and non-sentience in the gradient that you imagined of sentience, where the shift happens.
Sentience is merely the ability to have a subjective experience. So at that point is when sentience occurs.
And how would you determine a crab has a subjective experience?
Well, they have a brain, nervous system, they have eyes, which is a very good indication of sentience. It means that they are taking in their environment and have the ability of sight. So that would strongly indicate that they're sentient.
Well, don't insects have that too, like spiders and whatnot?
Yeah, so a lot of insects are sentient. I don't think there's any debate in
Insect
whatever
rights?
relevant community there is, but bees are certainly sentient. There may be some insects that aren't sentient.
So insect rights, you'd shoot a bird who's eating an insect to stop it from violating the rights of a cockroach?
So no, cockroaches are carnivorous for one thing. Secondly, most insects don't live very long lives, and they don't live very high quality lives. And you could argue the sentience gap is large enough where I think it would be a greater rights violation to, say, kill a bird or an anteater to save ants. So yeah, there you go.
Okay. Jake sends in a $10 super chat. I think it's Marfoglia. Who pays for imprisoning the animals? Should we imprison all weasels, lions, wolves, polar bears? What about intervening in carnivorous insects? I guess we just kind of touched on that. Adult Small Bear says, kill the spider to save the wasp. So, I mean, I think that there is some merit to that, right, BG? So he's saying, like wasps and bees are definitely, without those, you're not going to have any vegetables. You're not going to have any fruits. I mean, you need the pollination.
Well,
right?
it's only crops that require pollination. Not all crops require pollination. There are more than just bees for pollination. There's natural native pollinators, and there's wild bees like bumblebees, carpenter bees, things like that.
Well, and mosquitoes.
Wasps pollinate.
Mosquitoes pollinate.
Do they? Okay. There's pollinate.
Mosquitoes are a primary pollinator.
There's a lot of there's a lot of pollinating species.
Is that rape? That's rape under your view, right?
What?
Pollination.
No, because plants are not sentient.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Hugs. Spence sent in a $6 super chat and put hashtag hugs for Richard. Whom do you serve? Sent in a $5 super chat and says, JimBob, you are absolutely wasting your intelligence with this irritating soy milk. Of course, is Canadian. I cannot listen to his voice.
Vegan, is a Venus flytrap sentient?
No.
So how would you determine that it's not if it perceives the external world much like an eyeball does?
Well, perception would require a mind, a subjective experience. So that's question begging.
What's a mind?
That's question begging again.
What's a mind?
A mind can be defined as something that can have a subjective experience. How about that? You're literally question begging.
So I ask you what a mind is, and
you're literally question begging.
How?
You were literally you made
How?
a fucking premise that assumes the truth of the conclusion. You said
I
how
didn't present an
you
argument.
said a Venus trap is sentient because it can perceive the world.
I asked you is it sentient, being that it can perceive a fly getting in and it reacts and it knows it's
Okay,
a fly.
yeah, that's okay. So you're assuming that it's sentient.
I'm
That still
asking
sounds like
you.
question begging.
No, I'm asking you if it's sentient. I didn't say it's sentient or not. I'm asking you
Well,
if it is.
you made the assumption that it can perceive things. Perception necessitates a subjective experience.
Okay.
So no, it's not sentient.
And where's the difference between perception, like an actual reactivity, and mind?
Okay.
How do you distinguish
perception
mind?
is not reacting. I can mix chemicals in a test tube and they can react. I can mix vinegar and baking soda and they'll react.
I know the difference. I'm asking you, how did you determine the difference between reactivity and mind?
Yeah, so there's a few basic ways. Asking the creature, we can easily do that with human beings, with non-human animals, or plants, or whatever.
Crab.
Yeah, so if it has a brain, nervous system, if it has structures like eyes, if it has nociception and it can respond to noxious stimulus, these are all ways that we can deduce sentience.
So when a crab defends itself with its claws, is it thinking with mind or is it reacting?
I'm not sure. It could just react, but on some levels, it could have a subjective experience.
How would
like
you know the difference?
Sight.
How would you
well,
know?
I'm not entirely sure. I can't know another mind, but we can deduce that it's likely sentient.
Likelihood based on what?
Brain, nervous system, structures that would indicate sentience, which are found in other animals like eyes, nociception. I literally just went over this. Do you like listening to me repeat myself? Like, everybody's complaining about my fucking voice. Well, maybe you should blame this guy.
Well, we got to move to the next. Man, we got to move on to the next super chat. Donatus sent in a $5.33 super chat. Without predator-prey relations, ecosystems would collapse. Kind of covered that already. VG's compassion leads to the destruction of life.
No.
And by extension, humans themselves.
Yeah, the guy just doesn't understand my position. So, yeah, if it increases rights violations, I'm not in favor of killing carnivorous animals. And I also don't think we have a moral obligation to intervene in ecosystems. But there are circumstances where killing off carnivorous animals, like wolves in Yellowstone Park, would not collapse the ecosystem. Yellowstone Park had no wolves for a very long time, and it was just fine.
Yeah, in fact, Yellowstone, they introduced wolves and it caused problems, right?
Yeah.
Hollow Society 2030 sent in a $5 super chat. Is it in a way a sacrifice? Humans must labor their due and tend lay garden. We sacrifice care for animals. In return, the animal feeds the community. So he's saying that there's like an exchange there, that the animals, which ordinarily would have a pretty much insufferable life, is being well taken care of and having a nice, comfortable life in exchange for feeding you.
Yeah, that was a argument that slave traders initially made when the African slave trade first began. They believed that Africans in their homeland were living in squalor. There was a lot of civil wars. Even till this day, there's a lot of civil wars and tribal warfare. And they thought they were giving them a better life by giving them modern living conditions, away from starvation, famine, tribal warfare. So I don't see that as an argument for why we would enslave other beings or murder them, just because, I don't know, maybe some of the circumstances they would have if they were living in the wild would be worse.
But couldn't that argument be true for what happened with Africans and be conceded as being true and still not be true when it came to the animal fact?
Well, I'm saying it's the same argument.
Well, I agree it's the same argument, but it doesn't have to be true to both, right?
Well, right. What I'm saying is I don't see an animal gaining some sort of benefit from being kept in an enclosed space and then eventually murdered as a moral justification for doing such a thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Georgie Porgy sent in a $9.11 super chat. It doesn't say anything. Appreciate the super chat. Vanessa Rios sent in $9.99 and says, who speaks for the animal to know whether it wants rights forced upon it? Why not just eliminate humans? Animals win. Happy now.
Well, I think we can make a number of assumptions when it comes to whether or not animals want rights. They do appear to have a will to live. They do appear to want to experience well-being and avoid suffering. And based on that, yeah, we can assume they would want rights, even though they can't verbalize
How do you
that.
distinguish will from reactivity?
Well, again, we have to make a number of assumptions, but given how animals avoid painful experiences and they are drawn towards pleasurable experiences, either way, the safe option would be to grant them rights.
So I assume that they have will that's independent or distinct from their reactivity.
Right, like we could, like, again, if you're going to use the solipsism argument, we can't know another mind. We could make the same thing about
like
human
that.
beings.
No.
Well,
not like that.
like if we find tribes people that can't speak our language, maybe when we like stab them with forks, like maybe it's just reactivity. Maybe they don't mind being stabbed and eaten.
Well, no, human beings do have a reactive part. Like if someone was drowning and they wanted to drown, them flailing underwater and their body like freaking out, we might perceive that as, oh, they're trying to live, right? But that's actually not the case in that scenario. So that's why it's an important question. At least you admit it's an assumption.
Well, like, again, we can look at physiology of a creature. If they have nociception, if they have a central nervous system, they have centers in their brain that specifically deal with pain, we can know that they're suffering. And since they go to great lengths to avoid suffering and dying, I don't know why it would be assumed that, maybe they want to die.
Well, no, because their will, what you're calling a will to live, would just be a pre-programmed response to live, to procreate.
Okay, you could argue that in humans.
In humans, that they
it has been argued by biologists that any being that has consciousness has a pre-programmed will to live, just because that's an evolutionary advantage.
What about pre-programmed to eat meat?
I don't know, maybe, but probably not.
Well, we're back to the mechanistic argument. If we're all pre-programmed to do the things we do, you'd have to intervene with those behaviors. But if you don't have something that appeals outside of the naturalistic view, a mechanistic view, you can't actually argue for intervention of anything if it's pre-programmed.
Yeah, you can.
How?
Based on the creature's preference, the subject's preference, or your own preferences.
Those would be pre-programmed in your view.
Okay.
So, what is a preference? If it's just a pre-programmed response,
God could be pre-programmed.
That doesn't answer the question, but
well, like anything could be pre-programmed. God could be pre-programmed. Like you could be pre-programmed to believe in God. Like what does this have to do with anything?
Calvinists actually believe that we are pre-programmed, basically.
Yeah. Well, there are Christians who actually believe in determinism. Like I have seen that.
That's what I mean, Calvinists. Yeah. But I think the point he's trying to make a distinguishment with is he's saying, how do you deal with the fact that, again, when you're talking about the mechanistic portion of this, you're presupposing those things are baked in and not really accounting for them. That's what he's asking, I think.
Well, if we presuppose that we're programmed to shy away from pain and seek pleasure, I don't see how that changes one's preferences for creating policy that would avoid pain and provide more pleasure. Like I'm not understanding what you're trying to make.
Well, that position, you're assuming pain should be avoided. Am I right?
Well, yeah, that's my preference to avoid pain.
What about pain that your body needs to feel to tell you that something's wrong in your body?
Okay.
So now pain is useful, right?
Well, sure. You want to know if you stubbed your toe so you don't like fucking have it fall off.
Right. So it's not the pain itself. It's something else.
Well, sure. It's a greater degree of harm that you're really worried about. But okay. If, I don't know, walking down a dark alley at night and you're vulnerable and there's a lot of criminals around, and I don't know, they're going to shoot, stab you, cause serious harm. Like, yeah, we can agree that's something that should be avoided.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying,
like based on our preferences of avoiding pain and suffering and seeking pleasure.
Right, but
I'm
Good.
sorry. I have
Good.
to move. I have to
Okay.
move on. Georgie Porgy sent in a $2 super chat and says, "House's rights matter." Borp sent in $2 and says, "Soyri." Dale P sent in a $5 super chat, says nothing. Spin sends in $2.36, says, "For a cola for vegan gains." I don't know what that means for a cola. Like a Coke? You don't drink Coke?
I drink sugar-free sodas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
David Franco Jr. sent in $5 and says, "What did I just tune into? Yiddish cheeseburgers." What the fuck? Oh, because I see. Okay. Askarath sent in a $1.51 super chat. VG, your argument really, I win because logic not real. Okay.
That's not in any way an accurate characterization of what I said.
Georgie Porgy sends in $5 and says, "Vegan biatch," whatever he's trying to say there. Circle G Design sends in $2 and says, "Somebody call the wambulance. JimBob's dishonest." Spin sent a $5.89 super chat. "Name the trait that keeps Richard so horribly miserable for so many years. Hashtag hugs for Richard." What is the hugs for Richard thing?
I don't know.
Is that an
I've
actual
had
thing?
suicidal depression for a very long time, though.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know that. Right.
Yeah.
So like I don't know what to stay away from on this. Endless Mach 4 sent in a $20 super chat. What's time to a hog? That's a good question.
Time to a pig?
Yeah. So I think the formation of the logic there is like, if you're going to look at a pig and say, its lifespan is a whole lot shorter, from the pig's perspective, it doesn't know that. So, would you take that into consideration and into accounting in your worldview?
So if a creature is only going to live for a very short period of time versus, like another creature that's going to live for a very long amount of time, there's situations where I might prioritize the well-being of a creature that's going to live for a very long time.
Okay.
I don't know if he meant that or if he meant like if pigs can have the concept of time or what time is to a pig.
Yeah, I'm not sure because he didn't clarify, but he did send in the $20 and we do appreciate it. Jube sent in a $5 super chat. Vegan gains. Does the fact that we use the word should entail an objective moral imperative to be truthful?
No, using the word should, like, again, that if I use a word like should, that's assuming either we're looking at things from my personal viewpoint or if there's like an agreement upon some base axiomatic principles. So like if we should kill people, I think we would both agree that there's reasons why, that we both share for why we shouldn't kill people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Donatus sent in $5.33. I don't know why Posh and JimBob go down the route of made in the image. Oh, there's your super chat. Did go through, Donatus. Mm-hmm. So Jacobot sent in a $5 super chat. Human equals made in the image of God. But J equals not made in the image of God in your hypothetical. In JimBob's worldview, it would be human look human, which I think VG didn't comprehend.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what that creature was, so I wouldn't be able to even. But the problem is still, even if you came to this conclusion that he painted a group of people, the Jays, right, using emotional appeal and stuff, even if you bit the bullet, vegan, you couldn't actually tell me why that was immoral or something, right? So it would just be like a consequence.
Yeah,
of hypothetical.
So I'll explain these two things. First of all, you saying you wouldn't know what the creature would be just dishonest. They would be Jews. They would just not be made in the image of God. They would be Jews. They would be the people that you saw that were burned in the H word that happened in Nazi Germany. They would be those people in the hypothetical. You just keep trying to change the hypothetical because it makes you look ridiculous.
No, you have to violate
the answer is obvious, and it leads to you would either look ridiculous or you would be led to a contradiction. So you keep trying to run from the hypothetical, which is why I refuse to keep debating you on the topic. And
it's not a contradiction, and it's not.
And
Oh, sorry.
secondly, the trait is testing moral consistency.
What's
It
morality?
has nothing to do with logical consistency. It has nothing to do with my own worldview. You're the one who said the important factor in determining whether or not it's okay to kill a being or not okay to kill a being is whether or not it's made in the image of God. That was your worldview, and I was testing the consistency of your worldview.
In this
So
world.
you asking me, oh, well, how would you justify it in your worldview? It's a complete red herring. You do everything to avoid answering the question because you're dishonest.
You don't
and
understand.
you know it leads to you either looking absolutely ridiculous or it leads to a contradiction.
No,
So
the
you do everything to obfuscate, you make red herrings, you try to change the subject, and you try to change the hypotheticals or avoid answering the hypotheticals.
You're very, very high-pitched stuff going on here. If you asked me to completely reject my worldview such that another human being could exist that's not defined by my worldview, then it's not a criticism of my worldview. It's just an invented hypothetical where this being that you invented exists. And I also somehow know it's a J and a human, right? But I also, but it's not also, right? It's a human
You're
being.
doing exactly what I described.
No, you're asking me to violate the law of identity.
You're doing exactly what I described, changing the hypothetical, avoiding the question, creating red herrings. So you can repeat yourself all you fucking want.
You don't understand.
So David Franco Jr. sends in $5. He says, Vegan Gains, do you see how your paradigm is not grounded, whereas the Christian or any particular deist claim is grounded? Cause and effect versus it just is.
Any deist claim is grounded? Okay, so I guess Native Americans who believe in a bird that created the world, their moral views are grounded. I guess the ancient Greeks who believed in Zeus, their moral beliefs were grounded. I guess Muslims who believe in Allah, their moral beliefs are grounded. The Vikings who believed in Thor and Odin, their moral beliefs are grounded. It's weird how all these different faiths, as long as they believe in magical fairy tale creatures, their beliefs are grounded, but mine aren't. Okay, well, I think I've explained myself enough. It's just you're presupposing stupid, ridiculous, fanciful beliefs that belong in a fantasy novel.
Do you think human beings have dignity, like the concept of dignity?
They have the concept of dignity, yes.
And then where would you derive? Oh, no, I'm saying, like, do you attribute the concept of dignity to human beings?
Yes, human beings developed it.
Oh, so it's not like a real thing. It's just like a developed.
I don't know what you mean by real thing. Human beings developed the concept of dignity.
Same thing with rights, right? Like morality. All of these concepts you're saying are just inventions.
I think what you're trying to do here is say that these kind of concepts objectively exist in a world where a God is present to create these concepts. I don't know how that would be objective because God has a mind. That would still be subjective because God has a mind. These ideas are still mind-dependent concepts. It's just that you're saying these mind-dependent concepts are created by a God, and I don't know why that makes it any more valid, credible, meaningful than concepts that you create. It's all subjective.
Hold on a second. First of all...
Oh, what the hell happened there?
Second of all...
there we go.
Second of all, so you use the word
mind.
Okay,
you cut out. You said first of all, and then you cut out.
Oh, sorry. First of all, you use the word mind again. I still don't know if you actually think there's mind.
Okay,
or not.
define mind. Define mind for me. Like maybe we can agree on a definition of mind.
Well, my basis of no, I don't think we could because my definition would be it's actually a transcendental aspect of reality that's derived from God. So there's ultimate mind, and then for us to even have mind. You need an ultimate mind, but you're not going to agree on that.
Well, come up with a definition of mind.
Well,
and maybe we can agree.
Well, we're not going to agree on the mind because I think there are transcendental things that exist.
Define mind, and maybe we could either agree on mind, or maybe we can test some of these ideas that you have with a mind and see if they're logically consistent or whatever.
We're not
going to be able to do it.
Yeah, well, hang on. We may be able to.
Okay, so I'm ridiculous, but you can't explain. I'm insane, but you can't explain what a mind is.
Calm down. You're so emotional. I'm concerned because Andrew is doing the move along thing, and I think the debate of the mind is a debate in itself. Okay, so it's a worthwhile thing. It's just that from our different perspectives, determining what a mind is from my perspective and what your perspective of a mind is probably an important distinction.
Either
right?
way, these concepts you're talking about are mind independent, regardless of how you define a mind. So I don't know how you can claim a concept like dignity is objective on the basis that God, I don't know, these are concepts created by God or requisite on God. God still has a mind. He creates other minds, according to you. So these are still mind-dependent concepts. You're trying to act as though these concepts like dignity are more meaningful because they're like made in some objective sense, which they're not.
Right,
You admit
right.
they're mind-dependent.
Okay, but here's the thing. If you agree that minds exist in however you define it and however I define it, it wouldn't be a logical it would be a logical jump or leap to state that God's mind is bound by the same operating principles as the human mind. So I wouldn't say God's mind is identical. So when you would be correct.
I'm not saying they're identical.
Okay, but you would be correct if God's mind was bound by other laws that human minds are bound by, and I don't believe that.
We could agree on that.
Different.
It's still a mind.
Yeah, we got to move forward, guys. I'm sorry. We have to kind of consider this like a lightning round because we're inundated with chats, and I want you guys to be able to answer them all, right?
Sure.
Props to VG for staying. From Georgie Porgy. Yeah, we appreciate that. Hexacon sent in a $5 super chat. What does JimBob mean when he calls Vegan Gains a wet machine? Is this an attempt to flirt with Richard?
No, I mean, from his worldview, and now I understand he's agnostic about some metaphysical concepts that we don't actually define as objects, as things, as he asked, what's a thing? But what I mean by wet machine is just a mechanism that's in motion, doing the things that it does and producing the outcomes that are completely consistent with the operations of the system itself. And the reason I brought that up is because all thoughts, all beliefs, all propositions, all attempts to make moral considerations in the world would just be a consequence of this machine.
By the way, guys, stop spamming about fucking Red Bar. I don't care about that, right? Just stop spamming the chat. I don't care about it, right? So now any super chat that might have come in with this Red Bar name, I'm not even going to fucking read it because you're spamming my chat. Get the fuck out of here. Wasting my time. So VG from David Franco, you should look into the Stoic concept of logos.
Okay.
Jube sent in a $5 super chat. Vegan Gains, if a bear violates a pig's right to live, should the bear be put in jail?
I guess in a manner of speaking, if it was possible to, like, if we had the resources to capture these carnivorous animals and put them in captivity, to prevent further rights violations, sure.
Gotcha. Mr. Miner sends in a $2 super chat. Vegan Gains, why are you so gains? Okay, got it. Georgie Porgy sent in a $5 super chat. What's next? I can't read it, man. Can't read that shit. Jacob sent in a $2 super chat. VG, if there was a consciousless animal, would you eat it?
Possibly. I don't believe what is it, bivalves are sentient. If I was like starving or something, sure, I'd eat it. I don't think it's a moral issue. I just choose to avoid those foods because I think they're gross. They're not necessarily the best foods for you. So I just tend to avoid animal products, whether they're sentient or not.
Gotcha. The Walrus sent in $5 and said, vegan, would Beast from Beauty and the Beast have human rights or animal rights?
That's for me?
Yeah.
Well, I think they're one and the same. They're a logical extension of human rights. Technically, the Beast is human, but anything that has a substantive amount of sentience would deserve rights. And since the Beast has literally all the exact same traits as a human being, like, you know, intelligence, sentience, like memory, he's human essentially, just in a different body. Yeah, he should have human rights.
Gotcha. All right. Kroon asks, or Kroon Monero asks, will Zen debate with Avi or Ask Yourself? So I've tried to work on several different debates with Avi and Ask Yourself. It's very, very difficult to pin down propositions with those guys. So we've been kind of stuck in limbo with a lot, including JF Gary Epi, and a few others. So if I can't get anybody to agree on a proposition, we can't have a debate. Spin sent in $11.78 and said, even Richard is made in the image of God. Treat yourself to a burger. Okay.
A vegan burger. We'll have a Beyond Burger, I think.
Who do you serve? Sent in a $2 super chat and said, vegan gains are a lesbian. That's you could have done. I mean, if you were going to spend the time to make the insult, you could have done way better. I'm just saying.
I think he meant my wife and I are a lesbian couple.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
David Franco Jr. sends in $5. JimBob, could you do a Shapiro talking about opening up a kosher fast food joint called the Daily Burger? Tell James they serve up facts and logic.
I have great, fantastic news. I'm going to be opening an extension of the Daily Wire with your donations. Thank you very much. And it is what is it? A burger joint?
Yeah, it's a burger joint.
Pretty good impression.
It's a burger joint. We're going to be serving up J burgers. You know, now that it's legal to make J burgers.
Jeez. All right. Tom Aesthetic sends in $5 and said, would starving the coyotes of eating your dog and leading to their starvation be immoral? What if the coyotes were your pets and the dogs were wild?
Okay, again, I don't think a creature should have a right to commit murder, essentially infinitely, just because it benefits from it. Like if there were, I don't know, vampires, should they be able to kill an infinite amount of human beings so that they can sustain their life? I don't think so. So, even though, like let's say, like it hurt it, like a group or a pack of coyotes wanted to eat your dog and that would allow them to survive longer, I don't think that's morally right. So.
Okay. Nataverse for $5 says, hypothetically, if your waifu became sentient, would it be a rights violation to disconnect the she hologram from its gate box life source? What the fuck?
Not as the best.
I don't.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I wanted to ask, if houses were made in the image of God, would you have a problem with bulldozing down houses?
Impossible that a house is made in the image of God, from my view.
Okay.
Donatus sent in $5.33. The fact something has eyes does not equal sentience. A mechanism could just as easily be intaking the data and not a mind. That's a good point.
Well, again, you can use deductive reasoning. Yeah, just because something has eyes doesn't necessarily mean sentience, but when they have other structures that generate sentience and they have every indication of sentience, like you can deductively reason.
You know, and so then there's a bunch of chats asking about this guy who they've been spamming in the chat. And you know, the thing is like I would have read those. I would have happily read and asked those questions, but you spam my chat. Stop spamming my fucking chat.
It must be a bot or something.
Yeah, just stop spamming the fucking chat. Don't be a bunch of bitches. That's bitch shit. 2.2 acres and a bear sent in a $5 super chat. A Venus flytrap knows and senses when it's prey in its presence. I'm not a wizard, but wouldn't that ability lend to sentience?
So again, it's question begging. So knowing would imply that it has a consciousness. Just because it moves when a fly touches it, it doesn't mean it knows that a fly is there. It's just that the structures in the plant will react and react intelligently if a fly lands on it.
Gotcha. David Franco sent in $10 and says, a beautiful thing I've realized about orthodoxy is its cultivation of virtues. VG's worldview is devoid of virtue. Utopia is reached when all animals have rights. What other virtues do they have, though?
I don't know what he means by that.
So you could liken it to like cardinal virtues. I'm sure you know what cardinal virtues are.
No.
Or like a higher purpose, like a telos, like your goal here: improve well-being, reduce suffering for sentient creatures, right? Increase the well-being,
okay.
right?
So you're saying animals lack those virtues?
I don't know if he meant that actually.
That's what I think he's saying is like, if they all have rights, what other virtues do they provide after you give them rights?
Well, I I have no idea. Maybe they have virtues, maybe they don't. If we were to trade equalize human beings who lack the virtues he's talking about, I don't think it justifies killing those human beings.
Gotcha.
That's what I would say.
Georgie Porgy sent in a $10 super chat. So I've recently been hired by the World Economic Forum, VG, and I'd love to have your opinion on how to convince the populace of the world to abandon rich animal fats and adopt insects in their place.
So, I don't know about that. The most profitable agricultural product right now, I think, is palm oil. The amount of yield you can get out of it and how it's used in so many products, that's probably the most profitable, like, single food item, I think, right now. Insects. I don't know how much fat insects have, and I wouldn't think that's moral to harvest insects either.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom Aesthetic asks, can I eat the wolves that are killed in Yellowstone? My guess is that the answer is probably yes.
Like, again, in a vacuum, I'd avoid human and animal contact just because of zoonotic disease exchange. I'd rather not have people eat wild animals for that reason. Like, that's what caused the current pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. The bats, right?
Yeah.
Von Schlief sent in $5 and says, if animals didn't want rights so they can live in accordance with nature, would you force human-made rights upon them?
Yes.
If there was some mechanism for knowing.
Yes. There are certainly human beings, like psychopaths, who don't want to be burdened by rights imposed upon them. They want to be able to do whatever they want, kill, harm whoever they want, and take advantage of other people. Yeah, they absolutely should have rights imposed upon them.
Gotcha. Batman sent in a $5 super chat, and he says, we got to be progressive, JimBob. If you were in Germany and someone told you a hypothetical, maybe we shouldn't kill jays, you would flip out.
Can you restate that?
We got to be progressive, JimBob. If you were in Nazi Germany and someone told you a hypothetical that maybe we shouldn't kill jays, you would flip out.
Oh, I think he's saying if somebody proposed in Nazi Germany that Jews should be a protected class and they should have the same rights as other Germans, you would be in favor of that, would you not?
I don't believe in rights, so it's always
so
these
you wouldn't
questions with rights.
you wouldn't want to codify into law if you were to go back in time and lived in Nazi Germany that Jews have the same rights as other Germans.
It's a ridiculous I wouldn't know who I would be. I wouldn't know who I would be. If I was Christian, right, I would not.
You don't know if you try to prevent a Holocaust. Or sorry, I said that word again.
No, I wouldn't. I would prevent it, but not for rights reasons. It would have nothing to do with them being Jays.
The way you could prevent it is by using the legal system, which would have prevented the German government from eroding their rights, forcing them into ghettos, and then transporting them on cattle cars.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, if you could, yeah, I don't actually reject the justice system. I just reject the concept of rights. But if it's informed, if behavior is informed and enforced from a Christian worldview, whatever you would call that, sure, yeah.
Okay. Wicked Wally sent in a $5 super chat. Nice to see I got here in time for the meat of the argument. Dad joke from Wicked Wally. What if that every time? David Franco says grounding's not the same as coherence, going back to your earlier thing where he had said that, you know, all the people who do believe in Zeus and all of this have some type of grounding. He's saying that's not actually the same as coherence. So they can have a coherent worldview. It doesn't mean it's grounded, I guess. Donatus sent in a $2 super chat. If humans were carrots, would you eat carrots?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a confusing hypothetical. You'd have to clarify, but let's say, I don't know, humans had carrot bodies, but we still had a human mind, then yeah, I would protect carrot rights.
Okay. V 2.2 acres says VG must be a blast at parties. Boy sends in a $10 super chat and says JimBob's argument, there is a trait that differentiates humans from animals. And what I mean by human is something I can't define, and the trait is also something I can't define.
I disagree.
Okay. All right. Cleanixify sent in $10 super chat, says, JimBob, if vegan gains prove that eating meat is unhealthy and a vegan food system would increase food security and save more people, would you go vegan?
No.
Still would.
Would Jesus? Do you think that would be something Jesus would do if
I'm
it
not.
would
I,
help
cou-
people
I
and
couldn't make
save
that.
animals?
I couldn't make that
You
assumption.
don't. You think Jesus would not want to save animals, reduce carbon emissions, feed more people, improve food security, and use less agricultural space?
Well,
I
he ate
couldn't.
animals.
He ate animals, so I wouldn't know. But I wouldn't.
Isn't the only time he ever ate animals in the Bible like the one time he ate fish?
Well, no, so from the Orthodox perspective of church history, no, he did eat animals. And not only this, our saints teach us that God actually doesn't care what you eat very much.
Right.
It's
You don't
not,
even make
it's
a
not
judgment.
actually important at all.
Weird.
That's the deprivation. So we fast. We do veganism in Orthodoxy, just so you know.
Well, it's not
fast for
veganism. It's plant-based eating. Yeah, Daniel fast, right?
Nobody's really vegan. No one's really vegan,
Well,
right?
what I mean is that
yeah,
we
they
do,
are.
No,
we
they're
do
not.
we do plant-based fasting, but the whole purpose of it is not as some type of punishment, but rather for us to deprive ourselves so we can be closer to God. So
Isn't it supposed to be like a cleansing thing? Like you're also supposed to avoid red wine?
Well, no, it's not so much even a cleansing thing. It's really a deprivation thing. The point
Sacrifice.
of it is to deprive yourself of things that you normally would want to have in order to move you towards a better relationship of dependence on God rather than on earthly pleasures, things like that. Like you would admit, there's some food that is, ridiculously addictive to humans, and meat especially is very, very good tasting to most people. So, that deprivation, essentially you depriving yourself is the point of that, really.
The other thing about that question too, it was in a very materialistic lens that that we ought to get close to some sort of like equilibrium on Earth, that we should that our works here are about healing the Earth in a kind of way, and that fundamentally isn't consistent with my view at all.
Now, VG, there probably are tons of Christian sects that probably do some
Seventh-day
kind of
Adventists
fasting for that purpose. I'm just saying the Orthodox worldview doesn't work that way.
Okay.
David Franco asks, what are the virtues of the vegan movement? Humility, chastity, liberality, temperance, diligence, etc. Vegan movement entirely conceptual. So he's asking, what are the virtues that you would say the movement has?
Virtues. Well, the vegan movement is specifically targeted towards granting animals the same rights we grant to humans. That's really the only real virtue we have. Like, we do care about both humans and animals. That's why we want to extend human rights to animals.
But vegan gains, if we can't realistically, because I'm asking you a decent question here.
Okay.
So would you agree human rights itself and the justice system does require some resources, and even that is not uniformly and fairly processed and operated, right? So, I mean, when you say assign rights and extend them to animals and you go all the way down to crabs, is it just like a way of living, like a gesture in your mind? Because it can't be realistic, right? There's no way
it's not just a gesture. We do have animal rights currently. It protects them from mistreatment. Even in factory farms, there are laws regarding how they have to be raised, slaughtered, to protect the welfare of these animals.
No, I know that.
So the idea that animal rights is some unachievable, ridiculous goal is nonsense. We already have animal rights.
No, intervention.
And secondly, the main focus of codifying these rights is to get rid of animal agriculture, the biggest source of these rights violations. If somebody wanted to, I don't know, step on a fucking ladybug, you're not really going to be able to do anything to intervene. And the cost and time, to the legal system and shit, it's probably not really practical to intervene. But I don't know why, just because there's shortcomings, it would be unreasonable to codify rights into law.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at let's say you started with the obvious animals that you talked about that we do actually eat and do factory farm and stuff. I'm kind of asking how far do you take that down till you get to a crab? And who decides the value, the scale of value of what animal's next on the queue for rights, as far as intervening with animals, actually, not just humans, but animals eating them? How do you decide the hierarchy?
Again, we don't have any moral obligation to intervene. Like, this is just kind of a weird question. I don't see how it's really relevant in any way. If people have an interest in intervening in these things, then they'll have an interest in intervening in these things, and maybe in the future we'll create laws and structures to intervene. But right now we don't. I don't really care about this idea that, okay, let's try to give crabs rights so that, I don't know, some, like, the North Sentinelese can't eat them. Like, I don't know.
Okay. John sends in 2 back-to-back super chats. I'm going to read them together. They're for JimBob. If Jim believes he is fallible, like he said out loud, then it logically follows that he can be wrong and or misrepresent that humans are made in the image of God. Because if you're fallible, it's always possible that you are wrong. He also rejected VG's hypothetical because in the hypothetical VG post, it's not his current position. If you believe this, then Jim, then VG could have rejected your house hypothetical because houses aren't sentient in his view. If that would be easier for me, I can post that in chat and pull it up if it makes it easier for you to respond to it, JimBob.
Well, the first part, again, as I mentioned, the whole concept of having fallibility or infallibility or logic or consistency, all of these things don't exist in my view without God. So to remove God and then to be like, oh, by the way, we still have logic, and
I can't be wrong about God because I might be wrong about God. Okay.
What? That's not what I said.
That's literally what you said.
Do you know what literally means?
That is
literally
means? What you just said. Not word for word, but that's actually what you're saying.
No,
I cannot be wrong about the existence of God because I could be wrong about the existence of God.
No.
It is such nonsense, and it's
That's
hilarious how you don't even realize what you're saying.
That's not what I said, though.
Okay,
You're
well,
just a liar.
No, that is what you said. You just don't realize it.
Is there a set of preconditions for you to determine what is fallibility, what is true, what is coherent, what's consistent?
Well, you already agreed with me that it's possible that you could be wrong about everything, and you said the basis on which we could even be wrong is God.
No,
and
I didn't say
so
everything.
You are literally.
I didn't say everything.
You could be wrong about
lying.
everything. Your perceptions, every one of your perceptions could be wrong.
No.
You're saying there are certain perceptions you have that are perfect and could not possibly be wrong?
Perceptions about the external world could be wrong.
Okay, what perceptions do you have that are infallible? Name one.
Do I perceive logic?
Name one perception that you have that is infallible.
My understanding of the laws of logic.
How do you figure?
Because you have to appeal to them being true and consistent in order to even judge
so
the question.
it's not possible for you to say for you to create I don't know, an argument that results in a contradiction. It's not possible for
that assumes logic.
Well, that assumes logic. But what what I'm saying is, you're saying your perception of logic is infallible.
No, I said
if your perception.
Dude, I don't perceive logic. Where do you perceive logic? How do you perceive?
Okay,
it?
I asked you, what perception do you have that's infallible?
Perception presupposes logic.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, in order to call.
No,
to
it doesn't.
Okay, give me one example of you perceiving something that doesn't abide by the law of identity. One perception.
Well, you don't necessarily have to have an identity to have a perception.
Name one perception that doesn't appeal to one of the laws of color is law of identity.
Okay, color. How is that law of identity? You don't know. You don't need to know yourself or have a perception of self to see a color.
I didn't say self. I said nothing about self. What's color?
What do you mean?
Is color hamburger?
Well, no. Again.
Yeah.
What is color? That is a good question.
Color is a category, right?
Well, yeah, it's a category, but
that's an identity.
You literally just said it's
Color's just the light.
it doesn't require identity.
Yes, it does.
Well, no, it
perception.
doesn't require. So, do you mean identity meaning like an
A is A.
individual, or do you mean identity as one recognizing themselves as an individual?
No, I'm not talking about the self. I'm talking about perception, right? So you
Yeah,
can't
there's perceptions.
You can't perceive anything without assuming logic that out there, whatever you're calling, right, a name, that is not this. This is not that. Any kind of process like
No.
that. Yes.
No.
You
That's
give an example.
not
You
true.
and you would give an example.
Guys, we got it.
You could create. So it is
Create what?
possible that a being can only perceive one single thing.
What would that one thing be?
It could be the color blue. It could be pain. It could be an electrical signal. It is possible that there is a living being that can only perceive one thing.
Like blue.
Yeah, like blue, like pain, like an electrical signal. It could be any one thing.
Is an electrical signal different from a non-electrical signal?
I'd imagine, but the creature can only
identity.
perceive one thing, so it would only know that thing.
It would only know that thing? How would it know it's not itself? That's a law of
It
identity
wouldn't.
issue.
It could think
Then
that
it's not
that thing
perceiving.
is itself. It
Then
could
it's not
perceive.
perceiving.
Well,
Perceive-
if it's having a subjective experience, then it is perceiving.
Perception. Go ahead.
How could anything identify only one thing without knowing it existed first?
Well, it doesn't need to know it exists. It's just experiencing something or perceiving something.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to figure out how it would know it was perceiving it.
And
it
what is
might
it?
not be able to understand on a higher level that it's perceiving something, but it is just perceiving something. It's possible.
Big John says materialism is a dead worldview. Rest in peace for $5. $3 from Republicon. 7 is outside of the mind because other people perceive it. Therefore, it's not confined to the brain because each brain is a different chunk of matter. Yet they have the same concept. Also, Santa is real, you vapid public fleshlight.
Yeah, so just because a concept is universal or universally accepted or universally known, that doesn't mean it exists outside of mind or is mind independent. It just means it's universal among minds. That doesn't mean it's mind independent, so objective.
Okay.
Yeah.
$5 from Anonymous. Vegan Gains, you should read Wounded by Saint Porphyrios. He didn't eat any meat, and I pray for you. He said other choice words, but I'm not going to read them. They're fucked up. Let's move back here to Boy. He says NTT does not break the law of identity. It's an array of possible worlds. The two objects being equalized do not have the same identity, JimBob.
Two possible worlds already break the identity of one world and the other. So you're all you're doing is assuming everything is the same in the other world except for the one thing you're questioning. All things
that doesn't
equal
break
is
the law
bullshit.
of identity.
Okay, if I say, hey, what if humans and animals were indistinguishable? Would you kill them? Would you kill the Jews then? What does that even mean? Right? You've already collapsed the two things.
You are discussing, well, you named one specific trait in the image of God.
I didn't.
If God did not exist, then that would be the same identity.
So your argument against my worldview is if God doesn't exist, then what do you think now? How is that an internal critique
You
at all?
name the trait made in the image of God. If God did not exist, that creature would have the same identity. Like, you could be wrong right now that God doesn't exist.
If that was the case, then there would be nothing wrong with doing anything.
On what basis?
Like your worldview, naturalistic basis.
Well, okay.
Nothing would be wrong.
Does God's opinion?
God doesn't have
is that
opinions.
what? God doesn't have opinions.
No, that would assume that you process information, get new information, and then weigh it, and then if God is God,
does
right?
God think certain things are right and certain things are wrong?
I wouldn't say think. No,
God doesn't think.
I don't think the way you're trying to categorize thinking.
Does God determine that certain things are right, certain things are wrong?
Not in the same way you would understand determining. No.
Okay, how would you figure if you admit you don't know God's mind?
I never said I knew God's mind, which is
So you
different
don't
than
know
knowing
God's
God.
mind, but you know how his mind works.
It's apophatic. You take the coherency model and you understand
Right.
that
So
God
whenever
couldn't be limited.
I point out, so whenever I ask you about how God thinks, or I point out some
don't
sort
know
of
how
issue with
God
how God thinks, then you say, "Oh, but God doesn't think that way." And then I point out
understand.
that, well, you don't know God's mind. So how would you know if he thinks that way or not if you don't know his mind?
Because
You make
if-
up whatever the fuck you want. That's what this is.
No, because
You're
if
making
God,
up whatever the fuck you want.
don't
If you
listen.
don't know God's mind, then you can't
B12.
say his mind doesn't think this way or it thinks
B12.
differently than yours.
B12
You're making
and
up whatever the fuck you
need a-
want, and you're
you need
creating
a
your own
T.
fairy tale.
you need a tea. You need a hot
Sarah
tea.
Sarah Gardner says, "VG, what if me avoiding harming you harms me?"
Me avoiding harming you harms me. Yeah, there could be a situation like that. I mean, again, if somebody's starving and the only way for them to get food is to kill and eat somebody, that could harm you. I don't think that gives you justification to harm someone else for your benefit. You could steal from me and steal my money. That would benefit you if you're poor. It doesn't give you justification in my view to harm someone else just because it benefits you.
Quelo asks, this is actually a pretty good question. He says, assuming that the animals had rights, if your dog killed a raccoon, would you turn them in?
No, so if my dog killed a raccoon, I would just be especially vigilant to make sure my dog doesn't go near a raccoon. Raccoons are also carnivorous, so I don't think I'd particularly mind.
Okay. Lolo sent in a $10 super chat. I saw research that proved a plant react negatively to a person walking into the same room who had previously held fire to its leaf. This resembles sentience enough that you must reject eating plants.
It does not. You can conduct all sorts of experiments like these. They're just poorly controlled experiments. If you run a simulation like that or a repeated experiment, you'll always get different results.
Okay.
This is like a stupid high school project, playing music or like some type of music to plant another type of music. There's always no control. If you were to run something like that tens or hundreds or thousands of times, you'll get different results.
Gotcha. Does defending the rights of animals extend to unborn children? Kevin B asks.
For me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, to some extent, I think there's a point where a unborn child has a substantive enough sentience to where, yeah, it is a life worth protecting. I don't believe in protecting a single-celled organism, like right at the moment of conception. I don't think that's it's not sentient, so I don't care. So pre-sentience, don't care at all. There's probably a degree to which the unborn child becomes sentient, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that a substantive degree of sentience, but then there's somewhere where it does become substantive. I don't know exactly where that is, but yeah, in principle.
Okay, we're almost done, guys. Cleanexify sends in $5 for JimBob and says, JimBob, not from a nature perspective, but purely from a selfish human point of view, if a vegan food system fed more people, wouldn't that be better?
If a vegan system fed more people.
Yeah, just from a nature perspective, not from a selfish human point of view. If a vegan food system fed more people, wouldn't that be better?
Yeah, maybe.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
David,
I'd recommend reading the UN's latest climate report on Chapter 5, page 76. They go over that.
David Franco sends in $10 and says, you can see the telos of this worldview right there. It's eschatological. When they finally extend rights to animals, they lose purpose, no self-work to be done, all the problems outside of them.
I'm not understanding.
So what basically, if you finally extend all the rights to the animals, there is no more work to be done with animals. So what about all the problems that that's going to bring, having to deal with now these animals that have rights, essentially?
Well, we're not going to be breeding them, so there won't be nearly as many animals to take care of.
Gotcha. Dizzle Dazzle sent in $2 and said, let's get rid of JimBob's rights. And that's where the super chat's in. We held you guys here for 3 hours, 9 minutes. We almost got you out of the 3-hour mark. I was trying to. It's always hard in these debates because we had great back and forth going on. Vegan Gains, thank you so much for coming on the Crucible tonight. Take a second, shout your channel out for everybody. Tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, check out Vegan Gains on YouTube. You can listen to my annoying voice and hear me ramble about all sorts of things, including soy-related topics. So check me out.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, chat, but I appreciated him staying and having the debate. JimBob, go ahead.
Yeah, again, thanks, Vegan, for coming and also staying. Appreciate it. Made by JimBob, pretty much everywhere that I'm on the internet. You'll find me at Made by JimBob.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, from all of us here at the Crucible to all of you out there in Crucible land, we'll see you next time. Have a great night.